It basically guaranteed habeas corpus rights to the British nobility. And for about 400 years, it was only the British nobility. But then in the 1600s, it got extended to knights. And then in the 17 and 1800s, these rights became, were applied to pretty much everybody. Here in the United States, we got these rights in 1789 when the Constitution was ratified by the 13 states. But even now, America has two political parties, and one of them is following the example of Russia and Hungary, whose leaders earlier, just in this century, the 21st century, rejected democracy in favor of oligarchy and autocracy. They've turned away from this 809-year-long tradition. John Adams used to talk about America being a government of laws and not men. Right. That's not what's going on right now. Here's how it lays out. This is what's really going on. I mean, everybody's talking about how, this case is about Stormy Daniels and his covering. In fact, they refer to it on television constantly. Every time they do, I bang my head against the wall. I'm starting to get a callus. It's just incredible, calling it the hush money trial, right? It's not a hush money trial. It's an election interference trial, to be very, bland about it. It's a stealing an election trial. And here's how it played out. Russian intelligence in the days before October 7th learned that U.S. news agencies had acquired the Access Hollywood tape. On October 7th, that tape dropped, the morning of October 7th. And this is 4 weeks before the November 8th election. Oh, I've got the date wrong on here. I got to fix that. And it appears that they, along with Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, and David Pecker, choreographed a series of efforts to refocus voters' attention on Hillary Clinton and prevent the story of Trump's previous philandering from coming out. The Access Hollywood tape dropped at 3:30, just 30 minutes after, I said it in the morning, it was 3:30 in the afternoon, after the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of National Intelligence issued a joint press release saying, and I quote, "The U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromise of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations. The recent disclosures of alleged hacked emails on sites like DC Leaks and WikiLeaks, led by the Guccifer 2.0 online persona, are consistent with the methods and motivations of Russian-directed efforts. These thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process. Such activity is not new to Moscow. The Russians have used similar tactics and techniques across Europe and Eurasia, for example, to influence public opinion. We believe, based on the scope and sensitivity of these efforts, that only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities." So the Access Hollywood tapes drops, and immediately Russia drops the Hillary Clinton emails. That same month, Charles McGonigal, who is the FBI agent in charge of investigating Trump's links to Russia, who we now know was actually a Russian agent. He's in prison right now for being a Russian agent. But he ran the FBI office in New York and was in charge of looking into Trump's connection to Russia. He was also shared a bunch of common friends with Rudy Giuliani. And his office started leaking Hillary's emails. And on October 26th, now this is 2 days before this all came out, Rudy Giuliani goes on Fox So-Called News and basically says, we're talking some pretty big surprises. We got a couple things up our sleeve that should turn this around. You're going to hear about these in the next few days. 2 days later, Jim Comey caves to the pressure from McGonigal, the Russian agent, Russian intelligence, and Giuliani, and holds a press conference on October 28th to announce a new investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. And Hillary Clinton was outraged. She says, we're 11 days out from perhaps the most important national election in our lifetimes. Voting's already underway. So, when you look at this, what you see is that Donald Trump and Russia conspired together to distract us from the Access Hollywood tapes at the same time that Donald Trump Michael Cohen and David Pecker were conspiring to prevent us from knowing that not only did he talk about grabbing women, but he actually did it. With a porn star and a Playboy bunny, with 2 women that we know of. And of course, he raped E. Jean Carroll, and he's been convicted of that. So here we are. This guy has a very good chance of becoming president of the United States. How does that happen? I don't have a friggin' clue. Well, actually, I do. It's the racism, stupid. I mean, that's how insane America has been.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one, too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down, and as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP, because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 20%, 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care, by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Which one am I?
Which one?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2. There we go. That's it. Okay, thank you. That's better. Jan, can you hear okay? And now, Sean, can you talk back to me, please? Be right back. And sitting here with me, and we're yeah, I'm hearing things now. Nate? Sean, can you hear me? Oh, this is the wonders of live radio. Are you getting return audio? Sean? We're going to get into my thoughts and your thoughts and all that kind of stuff about what happened last night in a little bit. But right now, sitting here with me is the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Raz Baraka.
That's right.
And so happy to have you with us, Mr. Mayor.
Glad to be here.
Like Tim, I'm trying to get my return audio into my headset, and I don't know if Sean, if you could maybe play a little music or something. And you know, it's the engineers are still. We had all of like 4 minutes to make the transition. But Nate, you've got my audio, right? You've got my audio? Nate? You've got my audio, yes or no?
Yeah. Do you have my audio? Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna start doing the show here, and you know, on the assumption that we're sending audio, even if they're not hearing it. Excuse me. Let me get your microphone over here. We have. And let me just get things started here. First of all, hey, welcome everybody. It's great to have you all here with us. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's restaurant in Northbrook with a live studio audience, as it were. Special thanks to Matt Cummings, Mark Penske, Richard Shue, the morning host here on WCPT, Steve Lessman, Devin Andrakis, Bill Carmobilis. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing. Kenny Dobbin, and all the folks, the great servers and everybody else here at Max and Benny's. And sitting next to me here is Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who represents this neighborhood, I believe, or at least generally speaking. It's so nice to see you again.
So good to see you and to talk to you. So thank you for all that you are doing.
Oh, we would love to have you on the show more. I mean, anytime you want to come on and take calls for an hour, Rokana and Mark Pocan do that all the time, and Bernie used to do it for 11 years, and so we'd love to have you on. But what are your thoughts on the convention and how everything's going?
I thought it was pretty good. No, I thought it was amazing.
It really was.
You know, we've never seen anything like it, and I think the hope, the optimism, that we're ready for the future, we're ready for the first woman to be president of the United States, but we're ready for the changes that we need. You know, I think for several months, people were mainly afraid. They were afraid and knowing that we can't have Trump as president of the United States. But now they're saying the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And I'm for the trifecta. Winning the House, the Senate, and the White House.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think it's possible. I've been saying this for months, actually. Even when it was Joe Biden, I was saying, I wrote a piece, talking about how Donald Trump is in the fat Elvis phase of his career, and that's no slur on Elvis, but there was this point where basically, he was just kind of singing the old hits, and he had no new material, and that's Trump. He
forgot the old hits. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
He's blithering. He got cut off on Fox News last night. So it's I'm quite optimistic. I really am. What were the high points for you?
Well, certainly last night was incredible, and that was kind of the key moment. Is Kamala going to inspire the people who are listening? Are they going to understand how ready she is for this job? How great our country can be with that team that we have now for president and vice president. And I just want to say I love Joe Biden, and I want to thank him for his patriotism, for understanding that this is a moment. And he was the one who put his hand out for Kamala Harris. So last night was great, but all of it was really, really exciting. Yeah. All the voices that we heard, all the different people, and the diversity of the voices and the people that we heard from, that all see there is something for everyone in this. Yeah.
Well, and the thing about Joe Biden that just amazes me, people have tried to make analogies to LBJ and George Washington, but George Washington desperately wanted to leave the White House. He wanted to get back to his farm. He wrote about it. He had long conversations with Alexander Hamilton, who was kind of his ghostwriter about it. He was ready to go. And Lyndon Johnson was literally waking up in the middle of the night screaming, having nightmares because of the Vietnam War. He was just burned out, and I think he was ready to go. Joe Biden was still ready to do another 4 years.
He was.
And enthusiastic about it, and I think he would have done a damn good job, frankly. But he came to the conclusion that the best thing, not for him, but for the country and for the party, but mostly for the country, was to step down and hand this to Kamala Harris. And I don't think there is a parallel in American history to that. I don't think we've ever had a president make such a noble sacrifice.
I think the fact that everything is kind of new right now, young people are now totally engaged, which I'm so thrilled about. We are sending people in my neck of the woods, in our neck of the woods, I'm saying to the audience right now, we have what we call Operation Swing State.com, because we're close to Wisconsin and Michigan, and so people now are signing up at Swing State. Wait, I'll get it. OperationSwingState.com. If they go on that website, then they can get on the bus with us and go to those states and do something really important. Knock on doors.
Yeah.
You know, and people say, oh, that's the old-fashioned way. It's the best way.
Yeah.
And all of us, now that the convention is over, you all have to be thinking about, everyone listening, now what is the role that you can play? How are you going to get to work? And so, you know, in our neck of the woods, we can go to Michigan and Wisconsin. If we win those two states, we are likely to, you know, just take it all away and win the election.
There you go. We're going to hit a break here in about 30 seconds, and I'm just telling Sean and Nate to please fill this break so that we can figure out the audio problems that we've got. But Congresswoman Schakowsky, in the 25 seconds we have left, going forward, what are you most hopeful about?
What I'm most hopeful is that we're going to be able to have a country that cares about building the middle class, that we're not going to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans, that we're going to do health care for all, that we're going to be able to house people will be able to, you know, I mean, all the things that people want.
We're in our break now, so Representative Schakowsky, thank you so much. It's
okay, thank you.
Pleasure having you.
Am I done?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm done too.
Oh, okay.
This is the Thom Hartmann
Get to
Program.
work.
Great having you with us.
Please again. Taste it. It's just.
Yeah.
I've been to the convention before. This is something different. I mean, the excitement is incredible. The speakers are on point. They're not pulling any punches. They're going right at it. You know, they're not dressing it down. They're really just dressing it up. They're really just you know, giving it to us the way it needs to be given. And you know, what we have to do is take this momentum back to where we go and make sure we maintain it all the way through November. But the momentum is definitely gathering and building because of this convention.
You know, I remember back in 2004, the theme of the convention was strength. You know, John Kerry, strength and service.
Right.
I'm not sure how well that rang. 2008, 2012, we had these different themes, but now it's clearly freedom. I mean, you know, Joe Biden was all about democracy, but Kamala Harris has rebranded this as freedom. That seems to me like the most potent theme or meme that is possible, because it works so many different ways. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and then she threw Beyonce on it at that.
Yeah.
You know, so brought her song in it. Yeah. I think it's right on the money. And it covers everybody. Freedom from, you know, the kind of financial debt, freedom from a distressed economy, freedom to be able to go to schools and colleges and further your education, freedom to make decisions about your own health care, about your own body. I mean, the kind of concept of freedom covers everyone. You know, it also hits on the values and the history of this country, building on the idea of freedom and people fighting for freedom and gaining freedom in many different areas. So I think it's, you know, right on the money. And then Tim Walz right behind that. He's just, you know, to me, the all-American candidate. He, you know, just really puts the exclamation mark on the ticket to me. It was an incredible pick. His speech was just awesome.
Yeah.
You know, by the way.
It really was. Did you see his son crying?
Yeah, it just was
so
amazing. Yeah. And all of that, I think, is has a very stark contrast to what we've been used to seeing. This kind of machismo, the kind of stuff that's coming out of the RNC, all of this other stuff to see, even, Kamala's husband, the way he talked, Joe Biden's daughter, the way she talked. And then now you get to see Tim Walz's son expressing the kind of emotion, joy and happiness of all of this. Like, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to be joyous. It's okay to be happy. It doesn't make you unpatriotic or weak or less of an American because you're having a good time.
Yeah, and then you go over to the RNC and there's Don Jr. going on like he's speed rapping on cocaine or something.
Right.
I mean, it's just, it's like, it's so weweird. It's so, it's so sad.
Yeah.
So, you're also running for the governor of New Jersey. What as the mayor of Newark and potentially the governor of New Jersey,
right,
what do you see as the big issues confronting both that region but also the nation? I'm assuming there's an awful lot of overlap.
Oh, incredible! The things that Kamala has been pushing in her campaign are things that resonate with us in New Jersey. Affordability is a real issue in our state. I mean, a third of white families in New Jersey are struggling. 52% of African American families, 51% of Latino families. It's becoming very difficult to live because the cost of living is increasing in those states, in the state of New Jersey, over and over again. Housing being at the center of that. The lack of housing, the lack of affordable housing, and the state having to build housing in cities and counties as well, trying to figure out how to do that. So that is an issue that resonates with many of us. The access to health care and opportunity, all of those things are serious issues that we're grappling with. And so the national ticket and the things that are being put for on the national level are things we're fighting for on the state level as well.
Well, in that list of things, what are the solutions?
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com.
Are the morbidly rich sabotaging the very system that made them wealthy? There's basically two kinds of capitalism. There's raw, unregulated capitalism, sometimes called laissez-faire capitalism or jungle capitalism. And then there is the modern capitalism, regulated capitalism is what it's called. Raw capitalism basically produces oligarchy. It produces a small number of really rich people and a large number of really poor working people. It doesn't allow for unions. It does allow for things like monopolies. Regulated capitalism allows capitalism to function in a way that also benefits everybody in society. This is modern capitalism. Well, the GOP wants to take us back to raw capitalism, back to the Roaring '20s, back to what produced the Republican Great Depression. There's a whole article about it. It's called "Are the Morbidly Rich Sabotaging the Very System That Made Them Wealthy?" over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Sun is shining high. Pick up the phone and give it a try. Got a talk to tell or a question to pose. Today's the day, 'cause anything goes. Call the radio, share your heart from the biggest news to the smallest.
You would be bringing as governor of New Jersey that you're working on as mayor of Newark,
well,
that you'd like to see Kamala Harris do as president?
Absolutely. Invest in building more affordable housing.
Oh, yeah.
And she's talked about that. I mean, we have to build more. New Jersey is about 250,000 units short of affordable units across the state. Newark about 15,000 units short. We have to build more housing. We're not building enough. And because the cost of building is increasing, we need subsidy. We need support to build more. I mean, the region that I live in is probably the most expensive region in the nation in terms of housing and cost. So we need more housing in our region. That's one of the number one kind of remedies as well. And, trying to lower healthcare costs, lower hospital costs, so people can have more income in their households to be able to deal with.
How do we best do that in your mind?
Well, one, we have to begin to restrict some of these insurance companies from gouging and price gouging and raising the prices on insurance or subsidizing some of these costs. 2, we have to look at hospital costs, that are rising all over and regulate some of these costs that are happening in these hospitals that are driving cost up. Be the kind of tax breaks that we give to the wealthy to begin to figure out how to give middle-class families some of these tax breaks, how to give working families some of these breaks around health care, around cost of housing, around cost of daycare for your children or child care for your children, whether it's earned income tax credits or child tax credits or whatever it is, to begin to make the tax code fair, to make everybody pay their fair share, but at the same time using the resources that we have to take care of Americans that need it the most. And I think that is what really kind of generates economic growth. Taking care of people who will put their money right back in the economy and not in a tax shelter somewhere that's going to spend their money on food and eggs and milk and school and all of those things that we have to do every single day. And so we need to be investing in those families.
It seems to me that the Democratic Party is making a turn back toward Franklin Roosevelt and and Lyndon Johnson, back toward New Deal and Great Society kinds of quote big government programs that literally built the American middle class.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on that?
That's right on the money. And that's what exactly should be happening. I mean, and not just that, but also on a diversity. I mean, we can't run from diversity. It's proven that. Look at the city of Atlanta has a larger economy than the entire state of Georgia put together, and other states around it because of the diversity there, right? And we have to look at diversity as an opportunity, and not just as a social justice experiment, but as an economic growth experiment for the country to begin to invest and bring more people into our economy so we can grow it and make it more robust and take care of people so they have an opportunity to pay taxes, so that they have the opportunity to get a decent job. They have the opportunity to take care of themselves and their family. And that's what we should be doing. And so I applaud the efforts of, the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris-Walz administration that's coming up.
Yeah, Joe Biden really, I've been so impressed by, how much he's gotten done.
No, absolutely. With CHIPS Act, Infrastructure Act, ARP dollars, American Rescue Plan, pulled us out of COVID that way. People don't understand, as a city and as a mayor of a city, after COVID, we were in desperate situations. People weren't paying their rent, not paying their taxes, the other kind of parking tax, payroll tax, all the kind of things we're getting. We weren't getting anymore. We had huge holes. If it wasn't for direct dollars to these municipalities, you don't hire police officers, you don't hire firemen, you're not hiring healthcare workers.
Yeah, there you go.
All of that is important.
I think I'm hearing the music.
Thom Hartmann
just a
Program.
second. Mayor Raz Baraka, thank you so much for dropping by.
My pleasure, man.
Great
Thanks for
talking
having me.
Yeah, great to have you with us. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Carol in Minneapolis. Hey, Carol, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to have you help get a message to the Harris-Walz campaign that they need to be messaging that you need to vote not only for us, but you need to vote for a Democratic House and Senate, or we won't be able to pass any of this stuff. And I think that's a really important message for every Democratic candidate out there, that you need to vote not just for me, but for Democrats up and down the ballot in order to get any of these things passed. So if you could get that message out to the campaign, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, I will do my best. Are you working on that project there, Carol?
Well, I'm doing what I can. I've been involved in the DFL here in Minnesota for a long time. So,
pleasure to meet you.
And so, thanks for all you do, Tom.
Oh, my pleasure, Laura. Thank you very much for the call. Good talking to you. I just, I wanted to just speak a little bit about last night, too, and what I saw. We'll be rejoining our commercial stations in about 2.5 minutes here. So just the extraordinary energy in this place, the speeches last night
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202
I'm running out of words here. In fact,
9925.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down, and as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP. Because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann. Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
In the land of the free, something's gonna ride. From the White House halls to the Ohio sky. Trump's got his quirks, J.D. Vance is strange. The Republicans' antics out of range. They're all weird, can't you see? From sea to shining sea, did God make them this way? Were they born to be so strange every day?
They're so weird. Yeah, they are just so weird. I just wanted to give you a quick, and then we're going to take questions from the audience here. We've got an audience here in Northbrook. It's absolutely great having everybody here with you. I did want to first tell you about my rant today, which is titled "The GOP's Last Stand: Cruelty as Their Final Weapon," is the word we used in the headline. But back in the 1950s, Eisenhower actually ran for re-election in 1956 on a progressive agenda. Eisenhower was the guy who raised the top income tax rate from in the 70s up to 91% in 1953, okay? Eisenhower was the guy who bragged in 1956 that he had doubled union rates in the United States. Eisenhower was the guy that he'd added 5 million people to Social Security in 1956. That was the Republicans then. During Reagan, they adopted Milton Friedman's weird neoliberalism, free trade, destroy the unions, all this stuff, cut taxes on rich people. But they actually thought it was going to do something good for America. Milton Friedman, he was a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He promised them, if you just do this stuff, the whole world will be wonderful. They called themselves the Party of Ideas, the Republican Party. What is the Republican Party now? It's nothing. It's cruelty. That's all they've got. I mean, when Governor Tim Walz was giving his acceptance speech here in Chicago at the DNC, I'm sorry, it's been a long week. When he was giving his acceptance speech, his son Gus, who has ADHD, like me, hey, Gus was on camera just proudly proclaiming, "That's my dad," and he had tears streaming down his eyes. And Ann Coulter writes, "Talk about weird." And a right-wing hate jock, a guy named Jay Weber, he says, "Meet my son Gus. He's a blubbering bitch boy. His mother and I are very proud." Trumpy podcaster Mike Crispy ridicules Walz's "stupid crying son. You raised your kid to be a puffy beta male. Congrats." And another right-wing podcaster, Alex Lay, says, "Get that kid a tampon already." I mean, compassion for a learning disabled kid is dead on the right. I mean, all they have left is cruelty. Ronald Reagan shepherded through the most consequential border bill in American history in 1986. You know, it wasn't perfect. It did a whole lot of good, though, and you know, obviously it needs to be updated. There's a lot that needs to go on. So Senator James Lankford, a Republican from Oklahoma, he gets together with a bunch of Democrats. They put together a really good border bill, and then Donald Trump says, oh, kill that, you know, because if we fix the border, I don't have anything to run on. And then he goes on this thing, you know, he tore 5,500 babies away from their mothers. Over 1,000 are still missing. They were trafficked into these so-called Christian charities that literally popped up out of nowhere, took these children, and then went out of business, and nobody can find them. There's 1,000 missing children right now from Trump tearing them away. And then he told the border guard down there, oh, start shooting them in the legs. You know, like there's no arteries or veins in the legs that'll bleed you out or something, you know. All they've got is cruelty. They don't even have a border policy. All they've got is cruelty. George H.W. Bush, he worked with Mikhail Gorbachev, a Republican president, right, to unwind the Soviet Union, hoping that they would create something really good. You know, they didn't see Putin coming, I guess, you know, that he was going to turn Russia into a one-man dictatorship. But then, you know, and steal 700,000 Ukrainian children into the one country in the world where child pornography is legal. God only knows what they're doing with those kids, and I don't even want to think about it. And dissenters are tortured, and Donald Trump says, when Putin invades Ukraine, he says that's, quote, genius and savvy. You know, we are abandoning, the Republicans now are abandoning America's traditional role as a moral leader in the world. Trump and the GOP have abandoned all the founding principles of this country. All they have left is cruelty. During the 2020 election, Trump followers tried to run a Biden-Harris bus off the road in Texas. Remember that? They thought Kamala Harris was in the bus. It turned out it wasn't. It was Wendy Davis, the state senator from Texas. But, you know, they almost killed those people. Donald Trump tweets a picture of it with "I love Texas" in all caps. Right, you know, he's retweeting or reposting or retruthing or whatever the hell they call it, you know, pictures of a pickup truck with Joe Biden in the back, tied up, you know, hog-tied with a bullet hole in his forehead. This is not a single elected Republican. I did a web search on this last night when I was writing this op-ed. I couldn't find one Republican who condemned Trump for either of those things. All they have left is cruelty. It's it. Florida Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, he turned down federal money to feed 2.1 million low-income children in Florida. 2.1 million children. And the money was free. There's the federal government. Here's some money. And he says, no, we're not going to do that. And he's joined by 11 other Republican governors who also have turned down that money. And this is a country where 11 million children every year go to bed hungry. All they have left is cruelty. There are no principles to this party anymore. President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act. It expanded Medicaid. It would have given, had the Supreme Court not tinkered with it, shall we say, or 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, it would have given every single person in the United States access to health care through an expansion of Medicaid, all the low-income people. We've got 11, I believe it's 11, Republican-controlled states, and it might be 10, Republican-controlled states now that are refusing to take that money, that are refusing to provide health care. And the federal government pays 90% of the cost. All they have left is cruelty. When this 10-year-old girl was raped and impregnated in Ohio, you had the Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, Governor Kristi Noem, Fox's Tucker Carlson, Jesse Waters, Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. They all came out and said, oh, it's a, you know, they ridiculed it. They said, oh, they're just making it up. This is those liberals. This is that crazy stuff. When that little girl finally, you know, her family took her to, I believe it was Indiana, where she could get an abortion. Indiana's Attorney General, the Republican Todd Rokita, I think it's pronounced, launched an investigation into the rape. Nope. He launched an investigation into the doctor who did the abortion. All they have left is cruelty. That's all the Republican Party has. It's just, it's crazy. Donald Trump lost the 2020 election by 7 million votes, and he sends his angry mob into the Capitol to try to murder the Vice President of the United States and the Speaker of the House, and they killed 5 people and 3 police officers. 8 people died as a result of that thing. And, you know, they smeared the walls of the Capitol with feces. They defaced priceless paintings. And Trump gleefully watched this on television for 3 hours, over 3 hours. I think it was 168 minutes, if my recollection is correct, while refusing to call in the National Guard, refusing to do anything at all. You know, 5 civilians and 3 cops died as a result of that because all the Republican Party has left is cruelty. That's the bottom line. This week, on the other hand, in contrast, well, actually, a couple weeks ago, we saw the Republican convention, right? And what was it? It was just, yeah, whining and complaining, and oh, America's falling apart. Oh, America's a terrible place. Oh, you know, why don't you just damn move to Russia, Republicans? I mean, you know, you seem to love Putin, right? But we also, this week, here in Chicago, we saw the Democrats stand up and say, we're here for compassion. We're here for love. We're here for caring for people. We're here for feeding people. We're here for providing health care to people. We're here to establish American values in the United States and defend them all around the world. And that's the contrast. And just, you know, very, very sadly, all Republicans have left is cruelty. So anyhow, that was my rant. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com. But let's pick up some calls now. Matt is our microphone guy here. Hi, tell us your first name and your question.
I'm Olivia Aguilar. I'm from Downers Grove, Illinois.
Great.
Now, I watched the convention. It was so positive. My question is, though, they keep saying it's going to be a landslide. Not a landslide, a very close race. I don't think so.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Is it going to be that way, or is it going to be more of a landslide on our behalf?
I am not trusting the polls at all, frankly.
I never do.
You know, they were wrong in 2016. They were wrong in 2018. They were wrong in 2020. They were wrong in 2022. I don't know why they're wrong. I have a feeling it has something to do with cell phones, right?
Yeah.
But you know, whatever it is, you know, we just don't take calls anymore, and we can block unknown numbers.
So you think they're making it up?
I think they're trying their best, you know, the pollsters, because their reputations are at stake, and they're trying to keep their business model together. But I think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think you can underestimate the power of 100 million pissed off women. Frankly,
I agree.
As a starting point. So there you go. Okay. Up next.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm from Niles. I just want to know if you think Trump's going to show up for the debate.
Oh, you know, he would be wise not to. She's going to eat his lunch. I mean, you know, he talks about bloodbaths. He ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, it's going to be metaphorically, of course, it's going to be a disaster. But he is so certain of his own whatever, you know, his own infallibility, his own brilliance. He, you know, even though deep down inside, I mean, he knows he paid people to take his SATs tests. He paid people to sit in on his classes when he was in college. And, he knows he's not that bright, but he's got this bluster thing. So I think he's going to show up, and I think it's going to help us a lot. I really do. Knock wood, right? But I just can't imagine Kamala Harris going, I don't know. I think, no. She's going to bring a gun to a knife fight.
Hi, Tom. I'm Roger from Niles.
Hey, Roger.
What happened to libel and slander?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit
candidates lying about other candidates.
Audio and video art.
I thought that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I hear it every
hang
day.
on just a second. I'm not getting my audio back from Portland, but it sounds like we just hit a break. Yeah, we did. Okay, we'll be right.
Yep, I got you.
Yeah, I need that audio coming back though, because that's my cue.
Yeah,
if you could bring it up.
We got
now,
2.5 hours. We got time.
So that way I'll know when I can come back.
Yep. No worries. I see you.
We are
You're on my list.
We're live on Free Speech TV. Okay.
We'll work around.
All right. Well, let's. Okay. Hey, it turns out.
Hold on.
Turns out for about half our audience, we're still live. So, I asked them to cover it, but we didn't because I was too late doing that. So, again, your question. Let's go.
Again, I'm Roger from Niles.
Hey, Roger.
What happened to honesty in politics? Trump can lie about Kamala's track record, and nobody pushes back on it. I don't see anybody saying that's not true.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, I just, I saw the article about it. I didn't actually see the clip, but apparently for 6.5 minutes, Jake Tapper had him on, and he just lied and lied and lied, or maybe it was J.D. Vance. It was one or the other of them. And it was both of them. and Jake Tapper didn't push back once. I mean, what's with that? What's with that? And then they're all like, well, Kamala Harris hasn't given us enough details of her economic plans. Right? What was the 2020 Republican platform? whatever Trump says. It was 3 words, right? I mean, it literally, not literally, but close. I don't get it. I really, Roger, I just don't, you know, I mean, I'm sort of in that business. I know a lot of these people. I realize that they're walking a very, very fine line. The ownership of CNN is very right-wing now. The new CEO is a Republican. The new program director is a Republican. The corporation that owns them is very right-wing. MSNBC has a similar problem. They're a little schizophrenic. Their ownership is very conservative. It just seems like, you know, they're doing everything they can to get Trump elected again. The story that we all told ourselves before was that the media needs a horse race. That when you've got a horse race, when you've got a close election, everybody's paying attention. It's just like the last inning of a football game when the score's tied. Everybody, hey, get out of the kitchen, come in here and watch this, right? But I don't think that's enough of an explanation anymore. I mean, we were kind of telling ourselves that for a long time. I honestly don't know. I wish I did. I wish I had some insights into this. They're getting mercilessly called out, in the non-mainstream press. Dan Frumkin has a great Substack newsletter which is about the press, and he talks about this stuff, and he just takes them apart, every day. Jeff Tiedrich is doing the same thing. I mean, there's some just great people out there who are calling them out and pointing out the absurdity of all this stuff. But I am, the Fourth Estate, we've got a real problem with our media in the United States. We used to have, there was an op-ed, I think in the New York Times this morning, as I recall, that was pointing out that the vast majority of Americans are so uninformed that, the quote, undecided voters are undecided because they literally don't know the issues. They literally don't know very much about the candidates. And, we used to have these local newspapers. Half of the local newspapers in America are gone, and the other half of the half that are left are owned by right-wing hedge funds out of New York City. And they're regularly running the exact same content, and most of it's right-wing crap. You have 1,500 right-wing radio stations. I think it's doing a lot of damage to this country. We'll be right back. We're hitting a break here. We'll be right back.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So the Supreme Court is or at least the Republicans on the Supreme Court are completely out of control. I wrote an op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com titled "From Oaths to Lies, the GOP's Supreme Court Coup." And they gave king-like powers to the president to break the law and have immunity from prosecution as long as he calls it an official act. I mean, that's literally rewriting Article 2 of the Constitution from 1789. They signed the death warrant for agencies that protect our air, water, food, drugs, and workplace. That dates back to 1887 when the Interstate Commerce Commission was created. They gutted the 14th Amendment's requirement put into place in 1868 that no person who's engaged in an insurrection or rebellion can hold public office. They rewrote the National Firearms Act of 1934 to allow AR-15s with a bump stock to become fully automatic weapons. It's nuts. It goes on from there. You can read the whole piece at HartmannReport.com. But Congress really needs to hold this Supreme Court to account. Check it out.
On the airwaves with a message to share, tuning in the voices from everywhere. Got a lot on my mind and I'm ready.
Welcome back. We're broadcasting live from Max and Benny's in Northbrook, Illinois. With a great WCPT audience here. Great to have you all with us, and just taking your calls or taking your questions here. You got another question? Oh, that's not Roger. Roger's sitting next to you. Hi. Sorry. Hey, Joe.
And thank you very much for coming here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it's an honor.
I also saw that interview on CNN with Trapper, with Vance, and was absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
And it just seems that the issue that we need to try to do is have the media just address Trump with, like, are you kidding me, people? Yeah. How is this guy running for president? How is anybody considering to vote for this person? And the question I have is about the debate. I mean, should Kamala really debate him? or just say, this guy does not belong near, being a candidate for the president.
Yeah.
I'm not debating him.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I'm wrong. I was wrong about the convention. I thought that was going to end up being like a redo of '68 or something.
It sure
I'm
wasn't.
glad I was totally wrong about that. Maybe, my concerns about the debate are equally, misguided. But I do have concerns about legitimizing this as a normal candidacy, and just instead of just saying this guy is illegitimate and needs to go.
I completely understand what you're saying, and in fact, I was saying the same thing maybe a month ago or 2 months ago. And particularly after the first debate with Joe Biden. I publicly said, and I believe I even wrote about it in an op-ed, that he should not do a second debate, not because he did a bad job, but because there's no reason to legitimize Donald Trump. And I think that's real. That said, this is going to be an opportunity. Kamala Harris is one smart woman. I mean, she is just, she's going to go after him like a razor blade. I mean, and the last one, Trump told, what was it, 38 major lies and something like 100 minor ones, or I forget the numbers now, but, it's like he lies on average, once or twice a minute. And nobody fact-checked him. And Joe Biden really wasn't able to. I mean, between his stutter and being exhausted or whatever, he was struggling with that night, he just wasn't able to fact-check Trump. Although he did say 3 or 4 times, as I recall, that's a lie. But that's not enough. You can't just say, oh, that's a lie. You've got to go after it. Kamala Harris is going to do that. She did that for a living. She used to have, she used to cross-examine people on the witness stand. I would not want to be Donald Trump going into that debate. I would not want to be me going into that debate with her. I mean, I have recalibrated my thinking on it, and I'm seeing it now as an opportunity. I think it's going to work very well. So, next.
Hi, I'm Mary from Barrington, Illinois.
Hi, Mary.
Hi. And I wanted to talk about the non-compete that a Texas judge just shut down. It was due to take effect, the non-compete agreements that employers force employees to sign.
Right.
And with all of the hoopla going on about the convention, it fell between the cracks. And another Texas judge told the FTC, you don't have any business doing this.
Right. Was a question, and forgive me for not knowing, was this an FTC rule or was this the result of legislation?
And it was supposed to go into, this was an FTC rule.
Okay.
It was supposed to go into effect in about 2 weeks, and another Texas judge shut it down.
Right.
And they said it was too broad. It was, and we knew that the corporations were going to fight it.
Sure.
Because I've been the victim of non-competes.
Yeah.
My daughters in the healthcare industry are the victims of non-competes.
Yep. Same
and
here.
they basically put you, they're like, you can't feed your families.
Yep.
So
you have to work for us or you can't have a job.
Absolutely. So this is huge because, again, it goes to judges. It's the Texas judges again. And if we don't do something and get Kamala in there to appoint the right judges, and then, of course, fix the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Let's expand the court.
Yeah.
That's the easiest method to do this.
Yeah. The Republican, you're absolutely right, and thank you for bringing that up. I was unaware of it somehow. That just, it's just been a crazy week, but that just slid right by me, and I thank you so much for that. The Republicans did 2 really brilliant things back in the 1980s when the Reagan administration came in. The first thing they did was they decided that they were going to build out a media infrastructure. And they got their billionaire buddies. I mean, Reagan fast-tracked Rupert Murdoch's citizenship in just a matter of months. Typically, it takes years so that he could, buy radio stations or TV stations and build things. And that media infrastructure has really, really served them well. And then the second thing they did is they put together the Federalist Society. That came out of the 1980s. And the whole mission of this thing was to basically take over an entire branch of government. And there have been a lot of us who've been screaming into the wind about this. I wrote a book about this about 6 years ago, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court, The Betrayal of America, about it's the court's stupid. I mean, and particularly because of Marbury versus Madison and judicial review, the courts actually have more power in many regards than the president or Congress, at least in many areas, like what you're describing here, administrative law. And now you've got the Supreme Court having struck down the Chevron deference, which was, a policy that said that regulatory agencies have the power to make rules, and I'm surprised they didn't use the death of Chevron. So I'm with you. The Democrats need to get their act together on this. We need a left-wing equivalent of the Federalist Society. We need to be vetting judges. We need to be working, pushing them through the system. We absolutely have to expand the Supreme Court. We need to put a code of ethics in there, and we need to impeach Clarence Thomas. We'll be back at the top of the next hour. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's Diner. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
At least.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Help Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down, and as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their health care program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer health care systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like health care card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP. Because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, spending on health care by Americans went up 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
On the line with us is Daniel Squadron. Daniel is an American politician, former member of the New York State Senate for the 26th District. Stateproject.org is his current project. Daniel, welcome to the program. Tell us about the State Project. Or States
Thank you so
Project.
much, the state.
Excuse me.
Yes, exactly. Because there are so many, 50. At the States Project, we believe a couple things. One of which is, democracy, personal freedom, effective government, rise and fall, not just inside the Washington Beltway, but in the states themselves. and that state legislatures in particular have been an often overlooked part of a real power source for improving lives or doing the opposite, except for the most vested far right-wing special interests who've been investing for a long time. So at the States Project, we believe in helping lawmakers who want to improve lives, defend democracy, and protect personal freedom have electoral power and then use it effectively for their constituents.
How does that work? What do you do?
First thing we do is we just obsess about, think about, talk about the power of state legislatures. You know, folks think of the convention this last week, every domestic policy issue, every domestic issue that reflects the values of this country, state legislatures have done more good or ill in the last 15 years than even the federal government has across the board. Of course, abortion, reproductive rights is a massive example of that. Second thing we do is we're really analytical, because if you're going to do state legislatures, you might as well be really nerdy about it. So we analyze all 99 legislative chambers in the country. We determine where governing power itself, the ability to get things done, is on the line in an election. And then we work to identify those candidates who are going to be the tipping point, and we provide resources for them. We do all of this by engaging grassroots donors through our Giving Circles program to give them the tools to really understand this somewhat shadowy but so important portion of government. And they actually become the largest donors to these state legislative races in many cases, these just regular Giving Circles that form around the country.
Oh, that's marvelous. So how do people interact with States Project, STATES project.org? What sort of activity or interaction or participation from average people are you looking for? Or is this separate from that?
Oh, no, this is absolutely depends on it, in fact. You know, we think that a lot of national politics, it can be exciting and inspiring as it has been the last couple of weeks. It can be dispiriting as it has been too often over the last decade. But many people feel like they're observers to it. The national political scene is driven by broad tectonic forces, tidal forces. And so people feel like they are observers to the destruction of the democracy. At the state legislative level, they can have a much bigger impact, in part because the dollars are lower. You know, for less than the cost of a single competitive congressional race, you can fully fund great candidates to try to flip a state legislature. So at statesproject.org, people can learn all about state legislatures. They can also create their own Giving Circle because they can have the power. You know, our Giving Circles collectively, people who went to our website, set up, got their friends, neighbors, colleagues, family excited about understanding this power, contributed more to flip the Virginia House in 2023 last year than the National Party did. It is just a potent source of engagement and power for regular folks building their own groups under the umbrella of the States Project.
We're talking with Daniel Squadron with statesproject.org, and remarkable stuff. You've mentioned Giving Circles several times. What does that mean? How does that work?
So what happens is a couple of people get together to start their own. Actually, overwhelmingly, people who choose to do this are women. More than 3/4 of people who start Giving Circles are women. A vast majority have never engaged in politics beyond just making a contribution. And they start, and we provide, they get a web page, they get to name their Giving Circle, they get to choose which state the dollars they raise will impact this coming year. And then they use that to build their own community and network. And what the States Project does is every dollar raised by Giving Circles increases our budget to support great candidates in a competitive state. And the competitive states here are, ones that we hear a lot about and where democracy is really on the line this election. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Minnesota, North Carolina, New Hampshire, and then some states that often are left out of the national political conversation. But the country of 50 states having competitive politics all over is great for us. So places like Kansas, and Nebraska are also often competitive.
Yeah, I often I've long believed that were it not for voter suppression, and frankly right-wing radio, which is a force that the Democratic Party has, sadly not focused on over the years, and the Republicans have really exploited. But I've often thought that Florida and Texas in particular are really blue states, should be blue states. And so it sounds to me, Daniel Squadron, like what you're saying is that, a group of people, friends, relatives want to get together, a couple people throw together a, get together, create a giving circle through statesproject.org and direct their money into one of those states where we might be able to flip it. Or, as you mentioned, you said the majority, about as I recall, you said 2/3 of the people are women. Is that because women are organizing to try to change the abortion laws in those states where you've got, radical Republicans in charge and they've outlawed abortion?
It certainly is a major issue that will be decided in these states. When you have every Republican in Arizona voting against the right to contraception, but I think 2 voting to imprison people who access it, reproductive health abortion. But it actually goes back to our founding. And, the Giving Circles process it's about fundraising, but more than that, it's about community building and organizing and working collectively. And, Giving Circles exist in other contexts as well. And so I think some of what you see there is consistent on the gender breakdown, is consistent across types of Giving Circles. For us, the reason it's so exciting is, just imagine sitting around the family at a family dinner Friday night or Sunday night, and people start talking about whatever they've seen on their social media feeds, start talking about the presidential race, and someone says, what we can really change is those extremists in Arizona. Or did you know that Michigan and Minnesota and Pennsylvania, all because they flipped legislatures in 2022, expanded free school meals for kids, or passed clean energy and climate energy modernization legislation in Michigan that is just extraordinary out of that, auto state. And it becomes a way to engage people at a different level than the national conversation.
This reminds me, we just have 20, 30 seconds left here. I'm sorry, we're going to hit a hard break, but this reminds me of the old committees of correspondence from the Revolutionary era. Was that your inspiration?
It wasn't, but we should certainly talk about it more, and I'm inspired that you thought of that.
Yeah, they were doing basically the same thing. This was in many ways how the Revolutionary War was organized. And remarkable stuff. Daniel Squadron, American politician, former member of the New York State Senate for the 26th District, helping run statesproject.org now, States Project US on Twitter. Daniel, thanks so much for dropping by today. It's great meeting you, great talking with you.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on.
Pleasure and an honor. Keep up the great work, sir. We'll be right back. It's 15 minutes past the hour. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois.
Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back. Forward, let's fill all the breaks, please. I can take one question right now if anybody would like. Okay. Carrie, thank you.
Do you want to tell us your name and what is your question?
Yes, my name is Mr. Stroger. I live in Chicago.
Hi.
The precinct captain of the 29th Ward. I have over 775 people in my precinct. I've been there for 40 years, and I see a lot of my friends, they were middle class at one time, but now they're seniors. I looked at the stuff, and everybody was fired up, oh, it's good. But they didn't say enough about the seniors. They was there, and now they're here. And they have to pay taxes on the money that they give us.
Yeah, on the Social Security.
Social Security, it's ridiculous. So
yeah.
I have a couple of friends that I give money to because they can't take it. But I wish they would talk more about the seniors. The young people are really doing it for us. But hey, we did it. Yeah. And now it's our turn. I think they need to talk about us, let them know that, hey, I got your back.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you.
I think it was 86 that Reagan passed his Social Security reform. It was either 83 or 86. And one of the things he did was he changed the index that they used for cost of living adjustments. You and I are old enough probably to remember that back in the 80s, you could actually retire on Social Security. You could pay your rent, you could pay your groceries, you could even keep your car. You can't do it anymore. And it's because the COLAs have been going up like this, and the inflation's been going up like this. And they used to track inflation from 1935 until the 80s. And then the second thing Reagan did was he raised the retirement age to 67. Now, that didn't kick in until a couple of years ago, but that came out of that 1986 thing. And then the third thing, of course, is he put taxes on Social Security income. And, you know, we need a major reform of Social Security. And what's so tragic is almost the right word, I think, you know, mind-boggling, is that if you earn over $170,000 a year, roughly, it's like a $166.50 or something, whatever it is, but if you earn over $170,000 a year, you stop paying Social Security taxes. So somebody who's earning $1 million a year, they're only paying Social Security tax on 17% of their income. If they earn $10 million a year, they're only paying Social Security tax on 1.7% of their income. If the millionaires and billionaires, and there's a hell of a lot of them out there, and there's, you know, people, and not even the millionaires and billionaires, you know, the doctors and lawyers who are making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, who are living in the fancy neighborhoods that we all, you know, drive through if all those folks simply paid the same percentage of their income as Social Security as all the rest of us, as average working people, then not only would Social Security be solvent for forever, basically, you know, they only project 75 years out, so they say solvent for 75 years, but it's forever. But we could raise everybody's benefits by 20%, and we could adjust that COLA back to the, I think it's E5 or E6, I forget which one it is. Bernie knows this stuff, you know, he's such a wonk on this stuff. You know, because there actually is, there's like 5 or 6 different measures of inflation that are used to do cost of living adjustments in different parts of our government and in different programs. And one of them is specifically for seniors. It strips out, you know, the cost of gasoline, because that's not a big thing for seniors. It emphasizes the cost of medication and hospitalization. You know, and you know, they've just refused to go along with that. Bernie has been pushing this thing, and Democrats have been pushing this thing for years, and Republicans always block it. But you're absolutely right. We need to be focusing on this. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Everybody's all excited about how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are doing so well in the polls, and there's so much energy around the Democratic candidacy, and that's great. And we need to keep that up. And Trump seems to be going down in flames, you know, the fat Elvis phase of his life or his career. But it's important to realize that over $6 billion has been raised so far in dark money from mostly right-wing billionaires and big corporations, and none of it has been spent yet. September, October, it's coming. There's a tsunami of dark money coming, and we need to get ready for it. And the big way to get ready for it is to double down on registering people to vote, phone banking, sending out postcards, talking to neighbors and friends, getting the word out. Because it's gonna come down to people. It's gonna come down to people power. There's a whole article about this called "Will Democracy Survive the Tsunami of Dark Right-Wing Money Coming This Fall" over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Turn the dial, hear the chatter, voices rise, opinions scatter, across the airwaves, loud and clear.
Talk Radio is back with you here. We're broadcasting live from Max and Benny's Diner, restaurant. It's a diner, right? It's here in Northbrook, Illinois. And we have a live studio audience that our affiliate WCPT put together here, our Chicago station. And we're taking questions from the audience. Hi.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for what you do. I'm Cindy from Morton Grove.
Hi, Cindy.
And I've been wanting to ask you this question for like a year. So I have been so blessed that about a year and a half ago, I have been reunited with my then 16-year-old grandson that was adopted at birth. And have come to find, as I've gotten to know him over this last year and a half, that he's a huge Trumper. And he just turned 18 a few weeks ago. And I have never really talked politics with him other than when I went to his 18th birthday party and handed him the gift. He said, "Do you want me to open it now?" And I said, "That's okay, it's a Biden t-shirt." But I would like to know from you, the master, this can help lots of people who know young people that were indoctrinated at a young age for the wrong views. How would you best approach, without wanting to turn him off to getting to know his new grandma, to talk to him about some of these issues?
I think in my experience has been that the best way to talk to people who strongly disagree with you is to ask questions. You know, what are the things about Donald Trump that appeal to you? And then one at a time, you say, well, you know, let's say he says, oh, well, you know, he's strong on foreign policy, for example. And then you say, well, do you mind if I push back a little bit on that? Can I talk to you about that? Or would you rather just, you know, and if he doesn't want to talk to you about it, if he doesn't want to get into it, you know, it's more important to have a relationship than it is to convert somebody politically, frankly, in my opinion. It's different on the radio, by the way. I mean, I'll give him hell on the radio, but you know, it's not my grandson. But generally speaking, and if you can just, you know, go through as many issues as possible and just say, well, you know, here's what I understand about this, and here's what I've heard, and maybe you should look this up, or, you know, yeah, you've got a point there, but how about this, you know? But never be confrontational. What that does, in fact, there's some really interesting and really good psychological studies. I think Marty Seligman, actually, the guy who did Learned Helplessness, I think I'm not sure if he wrote a book or just an article about it, but how the brain actually, when you confront somebody on something they believe, even if they're wrong, even if they know they're wrong, you confront somebody on something they believe, or they think they're wrong, you confront somebody on something they believe, there's an actual alteration in brain chemistry that like puts up a barrier that prevents them from getting over that barrier to where they might see the other side. And that's why it's so important to do it very gently, very slowly, over time, and like you said, you know, be careful not to blow up the relationship. You know, I hope that helps. Yeah.
Hi, Tom. I'm Sherry from Evanston.
Hi, Sherry.
Hi. Thank you for offering intelligent conversation about what's happening in our world. So I have 2.5 things. One is a quick statement, one's an observation, and I'll tell you what the last one is. So why do you think it is that the Democrats don't really respond to the misinformation that the Republicans put out? Secondarily, why is it not addressed that Trump is mentally ill? And I say that not as an insult, because people I love are mentally ill too.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's true.
It is.
And then thirdly, Cindy forgot to ask you which of your books your history books would be good to give her grandson, because he loves history.
Oh, interesting. Wow. You know, I wrote a book back in 2005 called Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class. And it's a great kind of introduction to the whole thing. The whole Hidden History series are all topic specific. So, you know, if he went off on guns, you could give him the gun book or whatever. Back to your question. Where did was it, Cindy? Yeah. So your first question was.
Why is it that
Oh, why aren't the Democrats pushing back? Thank you. I'm sorry. My brain isn't all that sticky this week. It's, I don't know. You know, I think part of the problem is this fire hose thing, you know, the gish gallop that, gallop that Mehdi Hassan talks about, where, you know, you just concatenate 4 or 5 lies and just spew them all out at once and, you know, in one sentence, and now it's going to take 15 minutes to rebut them all, and you just can't do it. And so they just know that some of the lies are going to slip by. But that's the kind of bad news. The good news is Democrats are starting to push back, and they're starting to push back aggressively. And we saw that last night in Kamala Harris's speech, where she took on Donald Trump head on. We saw that in a whole bunch of those things. So I'm very, very optimistic that we're going to see a lot more of that. Right? Thanks for the questions. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour, broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois. I'll be back with more of the questions from our studio audience. Stay with us. For the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, it's Waking the Witch, Reflections on Women, Magic, and Power by Pam Grossman. This is from the introduction. Witches have always walked among us, populating societies and storyscapes across the globe for thousands of years. From Circe to Hermione, from Morgan Le Fay to Marie Laveau, the witch has long existed in the tales we tell about ladies with strange powers who can harm or heal. And although people of all genders have been considered witches, it's a word that is now usually associated with women. Throughout most of history, she has someone to fear, an uncanny other who threatens our safety or manipulates reality for her own mercurial purposes. She's a pariah, a persona non grata, a boogie woman to defeat and discard. Although she's often been deemed a destructive entity, in actuality, a witchy woman has historically been far more susceptible to attack than an inflictor of violence herself. As with other terrifying outsiders, she occupies a paradoxical role in cultural consciousness as both vicious aggressor and vulnerable prey. Over the past 150 years or so, however, the witch has done another magic trick by turning from a fright into a figure of inspiration. She is now as likely to be the heroine of your favorite TV show as she is its villain. She might show up in the form of your Wiccan co-worker or the beloved musician who gives off a sorceress vibe in videos or on stage. There's also a chance that she is you, and that witch is an identity you've taken upon yourself for any number of reasons, heartfelt or flippant, public or private. Today, more women than ever are choosing the way of the witch, whether literally or symbolically. They're floating down catwalks and sidewalks in gauzy black clothing and adorning themselves with Pinterest-worthy pentagrams and crystals. They're filling up movie theaters to watch witchy films and gathering in back rooms and backyards to do rituals, consult tarot cards, and set life-altering intentions. They're marching in the streets with Hex the Patriarchy placards and casting spells each month to try to constrain the commander-in-chief. Year after year, articles keep proclaiming it's the season of the witch, as journalists try to wrap their heads around the mushrooming witch trend. And all of this begs the question, why? Why do witches matter? Why are they seemingly everywhere right now? What exactly are they? And why the hell won't they go away? I get asked such things over and over, and you would think that after a lifetime of studying and writing about witches, as well as hosting a witch-themed podcast and being a practitioner of witchcraft myself, my answers would be succinct. In fact, I find that the more I work with the witch, the more complex she becomes. Hers is a slippery spirit. Try to pin her down and she'll only recede further into the dark, deep wood. I do know this for sure, though. Show me your witches, and I'll show you your feelings about women. The fact that the resurgence of feminism and the popularity of the witch are ascending at the same time is no coincidence. The two are reflections of each other. That said, this current witch wave is nothing new. I was a teen in the 1990s, the decade that brought us such pop culture as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Charmed, and The Craft. Not to mention Riot Girls and third-wave feminists who taught me that female power could come in a variety of colors and sexualities. I learned that women could lead a revolution while wearing lipstick and combat boots, and sometimes even a cloak. But my own witchly awakening came at an even earlier age. Morganville, New Jersey, where I was raised, was a solidly suburban town, but it retained enough natural land features back then to still feel a little bit scruffy in spots. We had a small patch of woods in our backyard that abutted a horse farm, and the two were separated by a wisp of running water that we could cross via a plank of wood. When we were little, my older sister Emily and I would sometimes venture to the other side where we could feed the horses, an act that still scares me to this day, and pick fistfuls of clover. But the majority of our time was spent on our side of the stream, threading ourselves through the thicket of trees that served as our personal forest. In one corner of the yard, a giant puddle would form whenever it rained, surrounded by a border of ferns. We called this spot our magical place. That it would vanish and then reappear only added to its mystery. It was a portal to the unknown. These woods are where I first remember doing magic, entering that state of deep play where imaginative action becomes reality. I would spend hours out there creating rituals with rocks and sticks, drawing secret symbols in the dirt, losing all track of time. It was a space that felt holy and wild, yet still strangely safe. As we age, we're supposed to stop filling our heads with such nonsense. Unicorns are to be traded in for Barbie dolls, though both are mythical creatures to be sure. We lose our tooth fairies, walk away from our wizards. Dragons get slain on the altar of our youth. Most kids grow out of their magic phase. I grew further into mine. My grandma Trudy was a librarian at the West Long Branch Library, which meant I got to spend many a long afternoon lurking between the 001.9 and 135 Dewey Decimal sections, reading about Bigfoot and dream interpretation in Nostradamus. Waking the Witch by Pam Grossman. Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out.
I'm here on the airwaves, ready for the fight. I'm challenging the voices that think they know what's right.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's Diner, and with a live studio audience, and we're taking questions from the audience. Matt?
Hi, Tom. I'm Ray from Mayfair in Chicago.
Hey, Ray.
I want to give a shout out to my 39th and 45th Ward progressive friends. And Northside Democracy for America is a group I'm on a board that does progressive work.
Oh, that's great.
And we all should be getting off Twitter and onto Threads. Joan talked about that the other day.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask about H.R. 1 and norms. The norms in politics and government have been destroyed by Trump and the Republicans.
Right.
We need to get H.R. 1 passed again to bring rules that we never needed before into play. What do you think about that? And how can we get more people, I'm going to have to say like Durbin, Senator Durbin from realizing what's the reality of now.
Yeah, I wish he'd stop respecting blue slips. You know, he needs to do what Mitch McConnell did and play hardball. But that's kind of a separate issue. H.R. 1, which means House Resolution Number 1, it was the first piece of legislation introduced into the 2021 legislative session by, I don't know if Nancy Pelosi was the principal sponsor, but, you know, she was the champion of it. And the companion piece was the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which may have been H.R. 2, I don't know. But those two pieces together, for people who don't know what we're talking about, they passed the House of Representatives. They got 51 votes in the Senate, 50 votes plus the tie-breaking vote by Kamala Harris. And then the Republicans filibustered it in the Senate, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin refused to break the filibuster, and that was the end of that. What H.R. 1 did was it declared that voting is a right in the United States, not a privilege, which would make it, right now, if you know, the state of Georgia wants to take away your gun, they have to go to court and prove that there's a good reason. They have to go through you have due process, because the Supreme Court has ruled that you have a right to a gun. But if they want to take away your vote, they don't even have to tell you. And what H.R. 1 would do is it would establish voting rights at the same level as gun rights, which sounds insane, doesn't it? I mean, we're the only country in the world, a developed country in the world, where this is the case. It would do that. It would establish, it would reinstate some of the 1974-75 legislation that was passed that came out, you know, out of the Church Committee investigations and whatnot, into all the corruption of the Nixon administration, and the Nixon taking the $1 million bribe from the milk industry, and, you know, the $1 million bribe from Jimmy Hoffa. It would reestablish those campaign spending limits and those donor limits. It would get big money. It would basically overturn large chunks of Citizens United, which was passed in 2010 with Clarence Thomas being the deciding vote after his friendly billionaire had given him several $1 million worth of goodies and trips, and suddenly, what's his name, Harlan Crow's political giving just exploded like something like 600%, you know, as a result of the law being changed, you know, by the Supreme Court. So it would fix that. I mean, it's just, it would do automatic voter registration when you turn 18. It would make it a whole lot easier to vote, to get registered to vote. Kamala Harris has promised that that's going to be her top priority, and I'm taking her at her word. I think it's really important. I think she's going to do it. The Democrats are very committed to this. The thing that is, I think, going to get the American public behind them on this is that we're all watching all these Republican efforts to suppress the vote. I mean, you know, you've got, down in Texas, they've put Greg Abbott's, I forget the Secretary of State's name, but he's put 2 million Texans, mostly in Houston and Dallas, blue cities, on what they call the suspend list, which means that when those people show up to vote, they'll be given a provisional ballot. Provisional ballots don't get counted unless you show up at the Secretary of State's office and prove that you are who you are and you haven't moved. And they can do this without any justification at all because of what the Supreme Court said in the Shelby decision in 2013. So, you know, it would undo that. I mean, it would just, you know, it would do so much important stuff. And then, of course, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is, you know, I'm kind of merging the two of them here in my blithering about this. But I'm with you. These are really important things. The For the People Act and the Voting Rights Act, and I fully expect this to be at the top of the list. And, you know, please God, you know, let us hold on to the Senate and take the House back, because this is the biggest challenge to democracy right now, are these Republican states where they're suppressing the vote. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Tom. I'm Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
From Morton Grove, and I have kind of a complicated question. Well, maybe it's not so complicated. I'm one of the ones that's fighting on my Facebook page. Uh-huh. And I've been posting things that are factual from vetted sources like NPR and other publications, Washington Post, New York Times. And so the response I'm getting from the right-wing people that I know, one of them accused me of putting on information from a dark web hack site. And I said, this is not a dark web hack site, it's National Public Radio. And then he says, so it's #1 radical disc jockey's biased opinions that I'm supposed to believe and comply to. I don't think so. So I posted a Wikipedia fascism article and analysis of Trump's false or misleading claims and how many there were from the Washington Post. And the Brookings Institution study on destroying trust in the media, and he says, no, radical sites. So how it's like common sense has left the planet, and I would like to write a book with that title.
Yeah.
So how can we bring back some kind of BS detector that we used to have?
Yeah.
Right? Because people knew when people went on media, the news, that used to be a public service, right?
Yeah.
Way back in the day, before recorded history when I was a kid. So how can we bring that back? Do we have to bring back the fairness doctrine? Will that do it? Is there some way? I mean, some people are just ineducable.
Yeah.
I was a teacher for a while. So, but this is like brainwashing.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is there some way we can combat this and overturn this so people start understanding what's really happening, which is basically a class war between the top 1% and everyone else?
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on that. That was great. First of all, just with regard to Facebook in general, Louise and I have a division of labor with regard to social media. I do Twitter, she does Facebook, as me, but, you know. And on our Facebook feed, and every day she posts my daily take, you know, from Hartmann Report. And I would guess probably 10 or 12 times a day she blocks people. You just can't engage these people. And one of the reasons that you don't want to engage them is because many of them are actually paid to do this. When I first moved to Washington, D.C. back in 2008 or 2009, I was given tours of a number of the right-wing think tanks. And one of them, down in their basement, there was about 30 people, most of them were young people, sitting at computer monitors. And I walked through, every single one of them was editing a Wikipedia page. It was a right-wing think tank. There are right-wing, at that time, Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh were both getting over $1 million a year from the Heritage Foundation as subsidies, essentially. Politico did a whole story about this. You know, there's big money behind a lot of these people, number one. Number two, Russia's behind a lot of these people. They're masquerading as Americans. So when you engage them, you're actually raising their profile, which is what they want. They want you to engage them. So the best thing to do is to block them. In terms of what we can do about these organized propaganda efforts, and that's exactly what they are, I think, number one, we need to be focusing on building our own. You know, somebody mentioned earlier leaving Twitter because, you know, Elon has just turned it into a cesspool, moving over to Blue Sky and Threads, which are the two, you know, big ones that have replaced it. I encourage you to do those kind of things. But stop engaging these people. Just block them. Just ignore them. Yeah. Oh, you know this person. Oh, you should still probably block them. That's crazy. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
My old producer, director. I don't recall all your titles. You had writer, we worked researcher.
Editor.
You helped me do the last edition of Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. You helped me rewrite that book.
We worked on the Hidden History series together.
Yeah, early on. Yep, absolutely. Troy, by the way, is running for the State House. It's called the House of Delegates in West Virginia. You are an at-large delegate for West Virginia here to the Democratic.
Yes.
Convention, party, whatever you call it.
And And I'm also our standing platform committee member for the next 4 years. So I was the West Virginian who helped bring together the Democratic platform as it exists right now.
That's great. That's great. It's been a couple of years since we were in the same town together. It's great to have you here with me on this side of the camera instead of the other side where you always used to be. Yep. Troy, by the way, his website is troyforwv.com. TROYFORWV.com, and his Twitter handle is Troy N, like Nicholas, Troy N Miller, right? Right there, there you go. So that's all that stuff. Your thoughts on? Well, first of all, tell me about West Virginia politics. What's going on in West Virginia?
Well, I'll start off by saying there is the traditional myth that we are a very conservative state. It's a red state. We are the Trumpiest state in the country. All of this, and to that, I will just simply say, look at how much money the Americans for Prosperity, for instance, the Republicans have to pour into our state in order to keep it that way. They don't believe that it's as conservative as they say they are, as they say we are. If they did, they wouldn't spend the money they are putting into it. And now we need national Democrats all around to help us get some money here. Part of our problem is that our erstwhile Democratic U.S. senator from the state, Senator Joe Manchin, he led the party, and in a way that left the party hollowed out, if I'm going to be completely frank.
Yeah.
We have a lot of first-time candidates, which is both really exciting, but also very daunting. We have there's a lot of great stuff going on within the West Virginia Democratic Party right now, and part of it is we have, last time I talked with you just a few weeks ago here, we talked about the West Virginia Democratic platform and the centrality of a 21st century economic Bill of Rights to all of that, which is for, you know all of this, but the audience, that is based on FDR's second Bill of Rights that he introduced in his State of the Union speech in 1944, which was itself based on the four freedoms that he had enumerated before that, which we have basically heard a lot about all through this convention.
And when he introduced the four freedoms, he said, his economic Bill of Rights, he said, a necessitous man is not a free man, quoting the old English judge, that you're not free if you're hungry, you're not free if you're homeless, you're not free if you don't have health care.
Exactly.
Pardon the interruption, but, it's ties right into this whole freedom frame that has become the core, the foundation of the Harris campaign.
And it is. I'm a little exhausted. I'm very excited after the last few days here. And the part of my excitement is that we are talking about freedom. I wrote an essay back in last November that was just simply called, "In West Virginia, Democrats are fighting for real freedoms." And it was put it up at the Daily Coast, put it up on my Substack, tried to get it out to as many outlets as possible. And it is very... I was never going to vote for anyone but a Democrat in this election cycle anyway, but hearing the National Democratic Party talking in these terms in no uncertain way and talking about how, in no uncertain terms, when we have economic loyalists, when we have all of this,
I'm not hearing music. I'm not hearing anything, Sean. So are we back live? Okay, welcome back. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's Diner. Courtesy of our affiliate here in Chicago, WCPT, having a fine old time. Taking calls from the audience. It's 10 minutes before the hour, by the way. And who's next?
Oh, you got it.
Hey there.
Hi, how are you, Tom?
I'm great.
Good.
But I'll get better.
My name's Katie. I'm actually from Barrington, Illinois. I'm here from my mom. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about my background here, I'm actually a small business owner. I'm also a mom of an autistic child with special needs. So to kind of see everything that's been happening this week, it's been kind of very magical, I guess, to say. Because, seeing the future vice president's son crying and everything, and just to see him get attacked. And for me personally, as a mother of a special needs son, it just makes me extremely angry.
Yeah.
And
Me too.
how dare you,
Yeah.
people? Like, seriously, go pick on somebody your own size, because this mama lion will come out and maul. Because that's exactly the behavior that I don't tolerate. I don't like it in our schools, and nor do I like it in politics. Just keep it out. Keep the kids out. That's the way that I think about it. As far as like with business, I am a woman and I am actually half owner of a heating and air conditioning company. So I am in the trade works. So with that being said, it was actually kind of amazing to see a lot of union workers, a lot of people in the trades coming up and just rallying around this, because honestly, it's like you have these right wings out there and they're saying that they're supportive of it, but really they kind of killed out our unions, if you think about it, right? Yeah. We moved away from Illinois to go down to Florida, which was a huge mistake, because my other half took a union transfer down there, and a couple months later, he lost it. So we had to work for non-union companies, and we ended up moving back to Illinois because the education systems were way better up here than in Florida, and thank God we left, because that was right before COVID happened. Oh, wow. So anyway, I guess like my question to you is, with me being a woman and within the trade work and half owner and seeing all of this going on now with the trades, how do you think this is going to work with it being expanded? Because for me personally, I'm concerned about it.
With
because,
what being expanded?
well, trade work, carpentry, unions, like, you know, because it's like you look at it's Chicago. You have these big skyscrapers. Who is going to take care of that stuff? You know, they're building these buildings with huge boiler systems and things like that, and all these people that are working on it, they're aging out and they're not going to be around too much longer. And we have like a learning gap in a generation right now where they don't know how to take care of this stuff. Yeah. So with the Department of Education and all that's been going on, and with the trades, I'm really kind of curious to see what it is that they're going to do to make sure that our infrastructure is not going to go down the tubes.
That's a great question. You know, when back in prehistory, when I was in high school or middle school, we had shop class. You know, and shop class wasn't just like, you know, something that dumb kids did to you know, get out of high school. Shop class was the class that you took to get a union apprenticeship, so that you could get a good job, and you could, you know, my dad raised 4 boys, and, you know, bought a house and bought a car every 2 years, and we took vacations, and he worked in a tool and die shop. You know, it was a good union job, and that's what we need to bring back. The whole shop class thing kind of died in the 80s. This was part of Reagan's defunding of education, you know, and then in the 90s, you know, all the emphasis on STEM and science, and, you know, we're going to shift from blue collar to pink collar, or to what was the technology, you know, and et cetera. So number one, I would love to see shop come back. I know that in some school districts around the country it has started to. The second is, I'm going to be back here next month, or the month after next, in October. It's in October, right, Matt? October 9th. Yeah, thank you, October 9th, for a labor panel. And one of the things that really amazed me a couple of years ago when I did one of these labor panels was the guy who's I'm forgetting his name, but he runs the sheet metal workers union. It's got a name that isn't that, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they've got a whole building that is like an educational thing where, you know, they're just doing brilliant work. And more unions are starting to do this because, you know, we're just not educating kids on this stuff. And so I really think it's going to be generative. I think that as more union jobs, as unions grow in strength and popularity and membership, you're going to see union jobs more and more being seen as an entree into the middle class. And as union jobs are seen as an entree into the middle class, there's going to be more people going into those professions. And I just believe that that's going to empower unions more. You're going to see unions doing more of this sort of thing. But you put your finger on, you know, what really is the side effect of these neoliberal policies of the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s. And one of the things that so encourages me about the Biden administration is that Joe Biden has just repudiated neoliberalism. He said, we're not gonna do that stuff anymore. That whole free trade thing, shipping our jobs overseas, tax breaks for billionaires, gut the unions. We're just not gonna do that anymore. And I think it's a marvelous thing. I think I'm hearing the music that means we're going to a break, but maybe not. No, apparently not. I was hallucinating. Yeah, what was his name? John Fugelsang talking about my taking LSD when I was a teenager. Yeah. Anyway, I took shop class, and I learned a lot from that, and I thought it was a useful thing, and I would like to see the trades brought back into our schools, and we need to be, yeah, exactly. We need to be encouraging that, right across the board. I think it's a very, very important part of. The idea that Joe Biden constantly repeats is that there is dignity associated with work. And of course, that dignity also, requires a paycheck that allows you to live, make a living, not just scrape by. And so now Kamala Harris has kind of reinvented that as, I'm forgetting the phrase. It's so, yeah, the opportunity economy. Thank you, yeah. And it's just marvelous. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I really do. But thank you for pointing that out. That was great. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Ezra Klein's new book, Why We're Polarized. This is from the introduction, and it's a couple pages into it. I'm starting out here. I have found that American politics is best understood by braiding two forms of knowledge that are often left separate: the direct on-the-ground insights shared by politicians, activists, government officials, and other subjects of my reporting, and the more systemic analyses conducted by political scientists, sociologists, historians, and others with the time, methods, and expertise to study American politics at scale. On their own, political actors often ignore the incentives shaping their decisions, and academic researchers miss the human motivations that drive political decision-making. Together, however, they shine bright light on how and why American politics works the way it does. There's much awry in American politics, and I won't in this book attempt to catalog all of it. But I've come to believe the master story, the one that drives almost all divides and most fundamentally shapes the behavior of participants, is the logic of polarization. That logic, put simply, is this: to appeal to a more polarized public, political institutions and political actors behave in more polarized ways. As political institutions and actors become more polarized, they further polarize the public. This sets off a feedback cycle. To appeal to a yet more polarized public, institutions must polarize further. When faced with yet more polarized institutions, the public polarizes further, and so on. Understanding that we exist in relationship with our political institutions, that they are changed by us and we are changed by them, is the key to this story. We don't just use politics for our own ends. Politics uses us for its own ends. There are many different types of polarization possible, and I'll discuss some of them later in the book, but the locus of polarization I'll discuss is on political identity. And that requires saying a few words about a term that should be very useful in American politics, but that has become almost useless: identity politics. A core argument of this book is that everyone engaged in American politics is engaged in identity politics. This is not an insult, and it's not controversial. We form and fold identities constantly, naturally. Identity is present in politics in the way gravity, evolution, or cognition is present in politics. That is to say, it is omnipresent in politics because it is omnipresent in us. There is no way to read the literature on how humans form and protect their personal and group identities, literature I will survey in this book, and believe that any of us is immune. It runs so deep in our psyches, so activated so easily by even weak cues and distant threats, that it is impossible to speak seriously about how we engage with one another without discussing how our identities shape that engagement. Unfortunately, the term identity politics has been weaponized. It is most often used by speakers to describe politics as practiced by members of historically marginalized groups. If you're black and you're worried about police brutality, that's identity politics. If you're a woman and you're worried about the male-female pay gap, that's identity politics. But if you're a rural gun owner decrying universal background checks as tyranny, or a billionaire CEO complaining that high tax rates demonize success, or a Christian insisting on nativity scenes in public squares, well, that's just good old-fashioned politics. With a quick sleight of hand, identity becomes something that only marginalized groups have. The term identity politics in this usage obscures rather than illuminates. It's used to diminish and discredit the concerns of weaker groups by making them look self-interested. Special pleading in order to clear the agenda for the concerns of stronger groups, which are framed as more rational, proper topics for normal political debate. But in wielding identity as a blade, we have lost it as a lens, blinding ourselves in a bid for political advantage. We're left searching in vain for what we refuse to allow ourselves to see. All politics is influenced by identity. Those identities are most powerful when they are so pervasive as to be either invisible or uncontroversial. American is an identity. So too is Christian. When politicians, including the irreligious, end speeches with "God bless America," it's not because they're making an appeal to a higher power, but because they're making an appeal to our bedrock identities. If you don't believe me, ask yourself why there are so few open atheists or even agnostics in national politics. This does not mean that politics is an equation solved by locating identity. Identity shapes our worldview, but it does not mechanistically decide it. And while we often speak of identity as a singular, it is always a dizzying plural. We have countless identities, some of them in active conflict with each other, others lying dormant until activated by threat or fortune. Much that happens in political campaigns is best understood as a struggle over which identities voters will inhabit come election day. Will they feel like workers exploited by their bosses, or heartlanders dismissed by coastal elites? Will they vote as patriotic traditionalists offended by NFL players who kneel during the national anthem, or as parents worried about the climate their children will inhabit? What we are often fighting over in American politics is group identity and status, fights that express themselves in debates over policy and power, but cannot be truly reconciled by either. Health policy is positive-sum, but identity conflict is zero-sum. The book Why We're Polarized by Ezra Klein.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Our show is sponsored this week by American Financing, saving homeowners over $800 monthly using your home's equity. Back, we're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's Diner, right? Max and Benny's Diner. Having a fine old time and taking audience questions. We've got a couple hundred people here. It looks like I'm bad at head counts, but a whole lot of great folks. And we have a question over here.
Hi, I'm Peggy. I'm from Deerfield, right down the street. Mm-hmm. And I have a quick question. How do you respond to Republicans, especially those on Fox, Scott Jennings on CNN, who, especially last night, praised Kamala's speech, but then say, why didn't she do those things? She had 3.5 years to do it.
Right.
And that's becoming their talking point.
Right.
What do you say?
Well, obviously, she didn't do many of the things that she's talking about doing because Republicans wouldn't let them, because there's, they've controlled the United States Senate for the last 2 years, and prior to that, they had the filibuster. And they had a couple of allies in Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who, thank God, will not be with us next year. Step by step. But they know that. They know that. This is, we talked earlier, somebody asked me about the media, this is this weird kind of tightrope that people like Scott Jennings have to walk. If you want to maintain your $10 million a year salary and your job with the big networks, you cannot appear to be partisan. And if you simply tell the truth in America right now about what's going on with the Republican Party, the Republicans all yell and scream and say you're being partisan. And that goes back to Lee Atwater's work the ref strategy from the 1980s, that he laid out during the Reagan administration. They have successfully cowed the media to the point that good journalists, I didn't hear that clip, so I can't specifically criticize Scott Jennings, but I'm taking your word for it. But certainly, and I didn't hear the Jake Tapper one where he was interviewing J.D. Vance, but one of our, folks here did, and I certainly read a good chunk of the transcript of it, and it just was awful. I mean, just awful. And it's like, I'm not sure what the solution is. It seems like part of it is breaking up the big media monopolies, bringing back local newspapers, getting hedge funds out of the news business, maybe even like Walter Cronkite. I mean, he was a star, but he wasn't rich. I mean, he lived in a nice house, but he was not making anything close to $10 million a year in today's money. This whole weird thing of news figures as highly paid stars rather than well-paid professionals, came along with the consolidation of the media really in the 90s in a big way, kind of in the 80s, but I'd say most of it happened throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. And it's not doing us any favors. One of the networks, and this was a story that I read in one of the media publications. There's these publications for people in the media business, and I don't recall which one, and I'm sorry, it's been almost a year since I read it, but they were talking about how several of the networks are talking about doing away with their stars and starting to do for the network news more like, Huntley Brinkley kind of thing, where you get a couple of people at the desk or maybe even 3 or 4 people who rotate. Rather than just having one person who has, an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours and they're like the big star and they make the big bucks. I think that would be, now the networks are talking about doing this to save money, but I think it would actually be a good thing, because I think that's part of the problem is that, when you're making $10 million a year and that you put it at risk by just, asking J.D. Vance to tell the truth, it's called a perverse incentive in economics. And, we need to do something about it. And, but for the short term, the main thing that we can do is speak loudly about this on social media. When you see it in places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, if it's in an article where you can respond with comment. If not, copy and paste the URL into social media and yell and scream about it and try and get people to, they do pay attention.
And they are starting to slowly respond. They have their own economic imperatives. Of course, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who spends half his time trying to destroy unions. The New York Times with Sulzberger, if I'm saying his name correctly, he was all on this Jeremiad against Joe Biden because he wouldn't do an interview with him. And, it's just bizarre, petty stuff. But a lot of it has to do with money, and a lot of it has to do with these media monopolies. We need to bring back local media. We need to bring back local news. Somebody earlier, maybe it was you, I think it was somebody earlier, mentioned the fairness doctrine. The fairness doctrine is not a panacea, because all the fairness doctrine said, and I worked in radio when the fairness doctrine was, in fact, I worked in radio news when the fairness doctrine, I started at WITL, Lamont FM, Lansing, Michigan, back in 1967 when I was 16 as a DJ, but, after about 1969 or thereabouts, I started doing news, and I did news there up until 1978, every morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., and then I went off and, I started a business and did my thing. But I had to operate under the fairness doctrine. It did not mean that we had to give equal time to anybody who said anything. What it meant was, back then, you used to have radio and television stations they would run editorials that were the voice of the management. And the fairness doctrine said that if you run an editorial on behalf of management, much like the editorials in the newspaper, you have to give equal time. And for a year and a half, I worked also at WGIM TV. And part of my job was finding those people who would be the response to, Tom Jones was the guy who was the station manager who would do the rants. So, it's a small thing, but it's a help. That was number one. The second thing was that you have to program in the public interest, and that was interpreted as you must have local news if you're a local station. And when the fairness doctrine got blown up, I think that was the thing that hurt the most. It wasn't the equal time thing, which is what everybody thinks of, because that really only affected management. You could run Rush Limbaugh all day long, and the fairness doctrine would have no impact on it. But the requirement that you have local news that's actually locally sourced in order to keep your license, that was really important. And you see that with WCPT. They've got local news. They've got a great news staff. They're doing a marvelous job. This is old-fashioned radio, and they don't need the government telling them to do it. But I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 of your radio stations are carrying network news, and they're not carrying any local news. In fact, there was famously a decade or so ago, there was a derailment of a train car carrying chlorine, which is just poisonous gas, could kill people. In I think it was Idaho, is one of the upper Midwest states, western Midwest states, and there literally was not a radio station within 100 miles that had anybody in a newsroom that they could report on it. They were all what's called voice tracked. They were all carrying national content coming out of New York City, and that's dangerous. I mean, it's a public safety thing, as well as a democracy issue. So, I probably, you asked me what time it was and I told you how to build a clock. I'm sorry, but, probably more than you needed or wanted to know. But those are my thoughts on that. Next, somebody else.
Well, yeah, I'm one of the reasons why I'm a fan is because I always, of your books and your show, is that you always provide historical context, which I very much appreciate. And I think one of the things we often forget now is how wickedly sharp and acerbic Joe Biden could be when he was younger.
Yeah.
I remember him running for president in 2007, 2008. Some of the stuff he said, which was so pointed and so funny.
He still can be.
He still can be, absolutely. Or, in the debates, the vice presidential debates, like particularly the one with Ryan, where he just completely annihilated him, and he did it in such a nice way.
I'm going to have to ask you to pause your question, because I wasn't paying attention to my clock.
No worries.
We got a hard break at 15 after. So hang on. We'll be back in 4 minutes, and you can finish the question, okay?
No problem.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you very much. We'll be right back. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, and from Max and Benny's Diner. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And I been waving her arms around, so I told her.
I love you, John. I think
I'm your biggest fan, Tom. I am your creepy super fan, and I want to just say I am here to share your outrage about the obscenity on our society that is fractionation and dog food. Better men than me would call this malarkey. And can I just tell you, it's almost every night I find myself talking about the exact same thing.
Okay.
You know, they make you think that there's not a lot of wheat filler in your dog's food. In reality, they break it up so you can't see it. It's not fair to your dog. And I don't know why the speakers at this convention are too cowardly or paid off by the big dog food companies, Tom, that none of them have the guts to talk about fractionation.
Our nonprofit listeners are totally lost now. So
I'm making a joke about
one of our advertisers,
which I love. It's a great dog food.
Yeah, it actually
My
is.
dog loves it.
Yeah, so do mine.
Are you enjoying the convention, Mr. Hartmann?
I am having a fine time.
Amazing.
How about you?
I've never been to one before. I've been to like the Grammys 16 times, but I've never been to one. And can I tell you, if I had to pick one DNC in my life to make this one my first, I'm sure Dukakis Benston was a party, but this has been incredible. I didn't know how much my heart needed to be in this room with these people.
Yeah.
And in many ways, the best part about the entire experience for me has been being here in this super spreader arena. I want to live on this planet. The people here and the diversity of people here. So I mean, it's astonishing, the warmth, the unity, and yet the diversity. No, not everyone's the same here, but there's so many different kinds of people from all over the country. And I have talked to Palestinians, and I have talked to drag queens, and I have talked to disabled people, African Americans. I've been hugged by so many people of so many different backgrounds here, and everyone has the same kind of hope. Everyone here is united in ways I haven't really seen, and this is an arena, a population of a convention that looks like America. I mean, I think back to what we had to sit through a few weeks ago with the RNC.
It was all white people.
It's all white people.
Other than a few shells, basically.
Grievance. Trump hates who we hate, and that's why this is a glorious vision. And Kid Rock coming out and lip-syncing some crap song to a tape track. I mean, it was grisly. And how many?
And then a washed-up wrestler. You know?
I mean, how many wife-beaters who've said the N-word on tape can you cram on one stage in one night? Here, we've had 3 different presidential spouses speak. They couldn't get one. We have 3 ex-presidents here. George W. Bush has been persona non grata at his own party for the last 3 conventions. I mean, the difference in spirit, that's the Trump party.
Do you think it's that he's persona non grata, that they don't want him, or do you think it's that he doesn't want to be associated with them?
I think they don't want him. Let me tell you. And by the way, I think the very fact that George W. Bush still hasn't come out and criticized Donald Trump, told people to vote against him, it kind of proves to me that Bush was a worse president than Trump. I'm still, my favorite debate is who was really worse for the world, Bush or Trump? Because I think the worst thing about Trump, Tom, is that he made everyone forget how awful and corrosive Bush and Cheney were. Here's the deal. We told our conservative brothers and sisters for years, and you were on the front lines, how wrong this Iraq war and occupation were.
I stood outside George Bush's house with a bullhorn.
You did it. I mean, I was out there outside the RNC in New York City 20 years ago protesting this thing and being called un-American, being called a terrorist lover. I'm from downtown Manhattan. Those towers were my neighborhood. And I was called a terrorist lover because I thought this war, this evil, dishonest war, is an abomination. They hated us, and when we were proven right, Tom, they hated us more. Then 2015, man-baby racist reality show clown comes along and tells all the Republicans, George Bush lied you out to war. The spell was broken. When Trump gave them permission, they cut Bush loose. It is a cult of fickle obedience, Tom. And that tells me, in 10 years, when another charismatic right-winger comes along, they're going to deny they ever voted for Trump. They're going to...
Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Washington Post reported that it looks like General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the dictator of Egypt, organized a $10 million cash bribe to Donald Trump when he was most desperate for cash during the 2016 election. And then Donald Trump repaid him by embracing him, bringing him into the White House, making Egypt one of his visits, and and just doing things that normally you don't do with countries that are run by dictators. The Washington Post pretty much nailed this. Well, why didn't we learn about this earlier? The FBI investigated it starting in 2018, but in 2019, Attorney General Bill Barr shut down the investigation. This is not the first time he has done this. He also shut down the investigation into the Iran-Contra affair, where the Reagan campaign was paying Iran with weaponry to hold the hostages to screw Jimmy Carter. There's an op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, "When Will Bill Barr Be Brought to Justice?" Check it out.
Wake up with the sunrise, feeling so alive. Turn that radio on, let your spirit fly. You got a thought to share or a secret to disclose. Today's the perfect
Welcome back. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois, from Max and Benny's Diner, and having a fine old time. And we had a fellow who had a question, and you got partway into it. And my apologies again. I'll pay closer attention to the clock next time.
No worries.
So you were saying?
Oh, well, first of all, I should say, I forgot to say I'm Dan, and I'm from Aurora, Illinois. So,
Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. But I was just saying that, as I said, I very much enjoy the context, the historical context you bring to this, and that's why I'm mentioning this. I said, people often forget what a sharp and acerbic guy Joe Biden could be. He ran for president 3 times. Well, yeah, I guess, 4 times technically, I think. But anyway, point is, it's some of the things he would do, like the way he went after William Casey during the Iran-Contra stuff. He was sharp, and he was very acidic at times, so appropriately so. And same thing with the debates. Like I said, with Ryan, he was so brilliant about it that Ryan almost seemed like he had a good time, even though he totally lost the debate. Right. He kind of activated that sort of folksy uncle, or that avuncular dad energy, whatever you want to call it, that Midwestern thing. And I was wondering if you thought maybe Walz is going to be doing a similar thing. I know there's one debate, probably only one, scheduled for the vice president, so him and Vance. And I was wondering if you think he might bring some of that similar, what I call big dad energy, and something like that. Because I think it's a way for white men to use privilege in a very positive sense, where it's like, I can model this alternative way. And also, I think sometimes a white man can be a little bit more aggressive than, say, a person of color. Where like Biden could really go after Ryan. And I was wondering if you think Walz is going to kind of do the same thing. He's, they're both Midwest Lutheran, very, very, good fan. As my history major gal tells me, she's like, remember, they're all from, this part of this string. Yeah. Anyway, I was just curious if you thought, what you thought was going to happen with the debate in general, and do you think Walz might be able to fill that similar role?
I don't know. We haven't seen him debate yet, but we have seen him take the bark off, the Republicans in his speech night before last. That was just remarkable. Louise called me up afterwards and said, if he was running for president right now, he'd be a shoo-in. That was that good. You very rarely see a vice presidential candidate do that well. Part of it obviously was a brilliantly written speech. I have no idea what role he played in writing that speech. I'm guessing it was significant, but, they have speechwriters for a reason. We're going to find out. I've never seen him in a debate. I'm not from Minnesota, so I'm not all that familiar with him. In fact, I really didn't even know who he was until about a month ago. When the whole who's going to be vice president thing started up, and I started getting calls from KTNF, from our Minneapolis affiliate, with people going, "Hey, Tim Walz," and I'm like, "Who's he?" And I learned. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see. We'll see. Great question. Thank you. Where's the microphone?
I'm over here.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for coming. My name is Trish Malarkey-Hatton from Palos Hills. I'm a longtime listener.
Hi, Trish.
Hi. My question is, should we be concerned about the state's certification of the votes? Many red states are doing things in the background that I don't fully understand to delay the certification of the vote. Right. Is there a process to make the states do this the right way? And my third thing is, I listen to Pod Save America, which is a subscription podcast, which I find very interesting, and they really bite bite back on Trump and his people. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah. Pod Save America is a great podcast and one of the top ones in the United States. You know, the Republicans are playing this game. If you can't win fair and square, cheat. It's just that simple, right? And it's reached the point where they're just doing it right out in the open, you know, and bragging about it, and you know, trying to go through the courts to do it. And the Supreme Court is the wild card in this. I mean, nobody, I think, probably nobody in the history of America would have ever thought that the Supreme Court would have said that the President of the United States is immune from criminal prosecution for actually committing real crimes, but they did it. You know, I mean, just the insane stuff that has come out of this Roberts Court over the last 2 decades, including Citizens United, which was just another abomination. What I understand, and I've had several of these people on my program, from some of the lawyers and people in the DNC who are working on these issues, is that they're not going to tolerate it. That they think they have the legal strategies to deal with it. It's why apparently Georgia is actually changing their rules to allow for this kind of you know, intervention in the counting of the votes. So far, no other state has done that, but hey, there's still 70 some odd days to go. I don't think it's going to work, frankly, and I think if it does work, it's going to be a disaster for them as well as for the country. So we'll see, but you know, the bottom line is the thing that will make it hardest for them to cheat like this is if we win in overwhelming numbers. And that means we've got to get everybody out in every state. Thank you. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be right back live from Northbrook, Illinois at Max and Benny's Diner. Stay with us. Our book today is Age of Discovery, Navigating the Storms of Our Second Renaissance by Ian Golden and Chris Kutarna. The paperback edition is now out. This is from Chapter 1, titled To Flounder or Flourish. If Michelangelo were reborn right now amidst all the turmoil that marks this shocking moment we're in, would he flounder or flourish again? Every year, millions of people file into the Sistine Chapel to stare up in wonder at Michelangelo Buonarroti's creation of Adam. Millions more pay homage to Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. Through 5 centuries, we have carefully preserved such Renaissance masterpieces and cherished them as objects of beauty and inspiration. But they also challenge us. The artists who crafted these feats of genius 500 years ago did not inhabit some magical age of universal beauty, but rather a tumultuous moment, marked by historic milestones and discoveries, yes, but also wrenching upheaval. Their world was tangling together in a way that it had never done before. Excuse me, thanks to Gutenberg's recent invention of the printing press, 1450s, Columbus's discovery of the New World, 1492, and Vasco da Gama's discovery of a sea route to Asia's riches, 1497. And humanity's fortunes were changing, in some ways radically. The Black Death had tapered off, Europe's population was recovering, and public health, wealth, and education were all rising. Genius flourished under these conditions, as evidenced by artistic achievements, especially from the 1490s to the 1520s. By Copernicus's revolutionary theories of a sun-centered cosmos, 1510, and by similar advances in a wide range of fields, from biology to engineering to navigation to medicine. Basic common sense truths that had stood unquestioned for centuries, even millennia, were eroding away. The earth did not stand still. The sun still did not revolve around it. The known world wasn't even half of the whole. The human heart wasn't the soul, it was a pump. In mere decades, printing boosted the production of books from hundreds to millions per year. And these weird facts and new ideas traveled farther, faster, and faster than had ever been possible. But risk flourished too. Terrifying new diseases spread like wildfire on both sides of the now connected Atlantic. The Ottoman Turks, backed by the new weapon of gunpowder, conquered the Eastern Mediterranean for Islam in a stunning series of land and naval victories that cast a threatening gloom over all of Europe. Martin Luther, 1483 to 1546, leveraged Gutenberg's press to broadcast a new narrative that society's hallowed institutions served only to fatten their own hierarchies. It spread faster than compliant elites could fathom. Europe broke into Protestant and Catholic halves. War and refugee crises ignited continent-wide. Meanwhile, the populist priest Girolamo Savonarola, 1452 to 1498, ignited a real fire, the bonfire of the vanities in Florence, the very heart of Renaissance Europe. With apocalyptic sermons, Savonarola stoked people's worst reactions to rapid change. He promised Florentines a return to past glories if only they would join him in his campaign to burn away weak elites and their corrupt agendas. Enough did so that he was able to lord over the Republic as a de facto king until 4 years later, his political enemies literally crucified him. Such was the age in which on 8 September 1504 in Florence, Italy, Michelangelo unveiled his statue of David in the city's main square. Standing over 5 meters tall, weighing in at over 6 tons of fine Carrara marble, David was an instant monument to the city's wealth and to that sculptor's skill. David and Goliath was a familiar Old Testament story about a brave young warrior who, in true underdog fashion, improbably defeated a giant foe in a single combat. But with hammer and chisel, Michelangelo fixed into stone a monument no one had seen before. It must have caused some confusion for those present at the unveiling. David's face and neck were tense. His brow was furrowed and his eyes focused determinedly upon some distant point. He stood not triumphant atop the corpse of his enemy, the standard portrayal, but ready with the implacable resolve of one who knows his next step but not its outcome. And then they saw the artist's meaning clearly. Michelangelo carved David in that fateful moment between decision and action, between realizing what he must do and summoning the courage to do it. They knew that moment. They were in it. We are in it too. The present age is a contest between the good and bad consequences of global entanglement and human development, between forces of inclusion and exclusion, between flourishing genius and flourishing risks. Whether we each flourish or flounder, and whether the 21st century goes down in the history books as one of humanity's best or worst, depends on what we all do to promote the possibilities and dampen the dangers that this contest brings. The stakes could not be higher. We each have the perilous fortune to have been born into an historic moment, a decisive moment, when events and choices in our own lifetime will dictate the circumstances of many, many lifetimes to come. Yes, it is the conceit of each generation to think so, but this time it's true. The long-term facts speak more loudly than our egos ever could. Share the Thom Hartmann Program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Republicans all over the country have been doing everything they can to stop people from voting. And the real pioneer in this area has been Georgia and their Governor Brian Kemp. He has been purging people from the voting rolls like crazy. And of course, they use this phony thing of voter fraud. There's voter fraud out there, to try to make it much harder to re-register, to register in the first place, or to even vote. I mean, you know, there's mile-long lines to vote and things like that. But now they've got a new scam. They put up a website saying you can delete your voter registration here. Now, who's going to do that? I don't think anybody, but, you know, it's there. The only thing is you need to know somebody's social security number to delete their voter registration. So for a whole hour on Monday of the week that they put this thing up, for a whole hour, the entire voting database, all 6 million Georgia voters, including their social security numbers and driver's licenses, was posted publicly on that website. So now anybody can delete votes. There's a whole piece about it over at hartmannreport.com. Check it out.
In the dawn's early light, we rise and stand, paws on the ground, united we band.
Pause on the ground.
this is Dogs for Kamala. Dog Guys for Kamala.
With cold blood in our hearts, we'll never lose. Move over, cat. We are the dogs for Kamala. With wagging tails and courage so strong.
Move over, cats. I have both, you know. We've got 2 dogs and 3 cats. Anyhow, welcome back. We're live here in Northbrook, Illinois, and we have questions from our live studio audience.
Hi, my name's Bill from Evanston.
Hey, Bill.
I'm a Sue's Stack and Substack subscriber.
Oh, great.
And
Thank you.
I want to thank you for my daily edification. You are a genius.
Well, thank you.
And a blessing for America.
Thank you.
And I'd like to talk about your rant a little bit. Noam Chomsky pointed out that the people in Chile were able to overcome Pinochet because they hadn't been conditioned by disinformation. They were true to their hearts.
Although it took them 30 years.
It did, and that it would take longer here.
Yeah.
I think we've been subject to a KGB operation here with disinformation, and yet there's a segment of the population that's been siloed and really doesn't have any idea of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And when you talked about the cruelty in their message, most politics in America, they reach out to the center. Everybody talks about trying to get suburban women. They are not. And I'm reading that this is a method by which they want to bring the bloodlust out in their particular audience. And the lady that was talking about the decertification and other rumors and conspiracy theories that we hear would indicate that this may be the case. And I'm wondering if the cruelty in their message isn't something to really stir up the red meat beyond normal political activity.
There is an element within the Republican Party and peripheral to the Republican Party that wants violence. That, you know, I mean, there's a reason why, 14 million assault weapons have been sold, you know, in the last 15 years, 20 years. Some mind-boggling number of these things are out there. The top-selling gun in America is the AR-15 or AR-14 or whatever it is, you know, the assault weapon. And yeah, and Trump is talking about letting the January 6 people out of prison. These are, and the ones who went to jail are not the people who just showed up, you know, with a sign that their flag that they were waving. These are the people who tried to kill police officers. These were the people who, you know, who defaced paintings, who smeared feces on the wall of the building, who ripped apart the offices of members of Congress, who committed violence against other human beings and against our democracy. Trump is celebrating that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is celebrating that. Paul Gosar is celebrating that. We've got this whole little group, and Andrew Clyde, you know, who is taking people on tours of the Capitol 2 days before, showing them where all the security points were, so that, you know, how to break into the building. And they haven't been held to account, frankly, by this Department of Justice, which I think is a horrible failure. So it does concern me that there is such an emphasis on cruelty, and it has become such a big part. I mean, it used to be just like a joke, you know. I mean, Rush Limbaugh used to tell this joke. He said, "What do you do with a man when he's down? You kick him, otherwise he won't get up." You know, and that was like everybody go, ho, 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 ho. And you know, that was kind of like marginal cruelty. It was like, you know, performance cruelty. Well, now it's real cruelty. Now it's, you know, the pickup truck banner with Joe Biden in the back, tied up, you know, hog-tied with a bullet hole in his forehead, being retweeted by Trump. So it does concern me, and there is this group which is not inconsequential, and it's not just the militia people who are looking forward to a civil war, and they're willing to kill their neighbors. They will fly a black flag, which means I will kill my neighbors, and we need to acknowledge them. We don't talk about them enough, frankly. The media almost completely ignores them. And the Republican Party not just tolerates them, but embraces them. And it's wrong. It's one of the reasons I wrote the op-ed that I did today. Although I didn't, you know, take that next step and talk about what you and I are talking about right now. But I think you've identified a really important and potentially disastrous aspect of Republican politics right now, sadly. Thank you. Hi.
Oh, okay. in context with what you were saying and what some of the other comments, I really am concerned about that same issue. And when I asked you earlier how the convention was, and what I was so pleased to see was all the peace and love and joy that came out of the convention. But the thing that's pressing on my mind is the reference to the violence that is underlying the potential of it. And I've just been thinking about these people that would support Trump and would vote for Trump. Who are they? Because my concern about violence is this. You have to think about how it affects different people and families. And that segment that they did in the convention where the people that had lost people.
Yeah.
And even in my own family, my father was trying to bust children in Mississippi. This was in the 30s. And he was shot with a shotgun.
Oh.
And in protecting himself, he lost his thumb and his eye. Wow. He was going to Tuskegee University. And that prevented him from probably, he could have been a Tuskegee Airman. That was taken from us. And then his sister became the superintendent of Denver school systems. Doctor, I won't go into what her name is. They put a bomb in her office and tried to blow up her part of the building when she became the superintendent. So we have to understand these people. And like you said, Tom, we have to talk to everybody. That's the only way we're going to get over this and get rid of all this Reaganism and this, that, and the other, is overwhelm the system. And hopefully we can prevent these disasters impending, okay? And out of all of that, you know, I didn't become violent or hateful or racist or in any kind of way, because that's not the way my family raised me. But hopefully we'll be able to get rid of this gun violence and the other things that are seething over on that other side.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to share with you.
Well, thank you. That was brilliant. I think it's important for us to remember that America was birthed in violence. You know, the American Revolution was, well, yeah, I'm getting there. You know, the American Revolution was violent. The largest genocide in the history of the world was committed by white Europeans against Native Americans. The second largest, arguably, genocide in the history of the world was committed by white Europeans against African people who were brought here against their will to be enslaved. And that continued for 400 years, and it continues to this day in many regards. Slavery is still legal in the United States under the 13th Amendment, you know, if you're convicted of a crime. So, you know, and one of the most powerful forces in American politics, through, you know, from the late 1870s right up through the 1940s, was the Klan. And what I'm seeing in the Republican Party right now, and the Klan back then was embraced by the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party was, you know, the party of the South back in the day, and which is why so many black people were Republicans right up until the mid-1960s. And then, you know, it flipped. And the Democrats, you know, with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, said, okay, we're going to become the party of a pluralistic, you know, racially balanced or racially friendly, I'm lacking a word here, you know, a society, a multiracial, multicultural society. And the Republicans adopted the racism. And, you know, they don't, I realize the Klan is still out there and still active, but in my opinion, the Proud Boys, and there's a dozen of them, you know, that are fairly high profile, these white supremacist right-wing groups. And one of their main things is this great replacement theory shtick that, you know, Jews are paying to bring brown and black people into this country and elevate them and all this kind of stuff. And it's just the Klan recycled, and that's what we're dealing with. And you know, you have to beat them. You defeat them with law, you defeat them with politics, and you defeat them with culture by calling them out, identifying them, you know, just pointing clearly at them and telling them what we think of them. We're hitting a break here, I'm sorry. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a second.
AF Contraception over on Twitter or whatever they call it these days. Laura, great to have you with us. Thanks
you.
so much for joining us. Tell us about Americans for Contraception.
Well, we're here fighting for your right to birth control. And actually, this week we had our 20-foot inflatable IUD named Frida. She was in town, so people got a chance to get photos with her and help educate and amplify the message that your right to birth control is at risk.
Yeah, and this is something that has pretty much flown under the radar, I think, for most of the corporate media. There have been, I've ranted about it on the air a couple of times. There have been a half a dozen beginning points in various states where state legislators have come out and tried to outlaw birth control. And then, of course, there's the whole national RNC talking about bringing back the Comstock Act, which arguably could outlaw birth control, or certainly many kinds of birth control. Fill that picture in for us.
Well, it's important to pay attention to what just recently happened in Washington, D.C., where Republicans in the Senate blocked the Right to Contraception Act. They filibustered it. A couple Republicans crossed over to support it, but the Republicans are the reason why the Right to Contraception Act did not pass the Senate. And in the House...
And the Right to Contraception Act was what?
Protecting your right to access birth control.
It basically said the states can't outlaw birth control, right?
Right. This is protecting your access on the federal level because we've seen with this particular radical Supreme Court that rights and freedoms we may have taken for granted over the past few years or decades, they could decide one day to take them away.
So why would Republicans be opposed to the right to contraception? I don't understand this. It seems stupid. I mean, in addition to just morally wrong and all that, just politically stupid.
Well, it's hard to explain it when 90% of Americans support birth control. I think that some elected officials are spreading misinformation and trying to equate birth control with abortion. They are not the same thing.
Right.
And so I think from a religious perspective, there are some people that are trying to combine the issues, but they're two separate issues. And I think there's a lot of misinformation, too.
The Catholic Church has been, just insanely anti-birth control forever, famously, and still are to this day. And they finance a lot of that kind of stuff. But has that, and they were the original anti-abortion folks, and the Republican Party up until 1979, 1980 was totally pro-choice with regard to abortion. And then the whole Protestant, when Reagan brought Jerry Falwell in and Ralph Reed in, basically they all became anti-abortion. Has the Protestant right, I guess you would call it, the hardcore right-wing Protestant groups, have they adopted that Catholic antagonism, around antipathy toward birth control?
Well, I think that you're seeing with the Southern Baptist Church holding a vote against IVF that all of the reproductive health care issues, especially affecting women, that they're taking stands against all of them. So I think that this is not just a Catholic-specific thing going after birth control, that we're seeing it across the Republican right, unfortunately. And we've seen misinformation coming from elected officials. We've seen in Virginia and in Nevada, the state legislators passed a state-specific Right to Contraception Act, and then Governor Joe Lombardo in Nevada and Governor Glenn Youngkin in Virginia vetoed it.
Both Republicans.
Yeah, they both chose, and they said things about religious freedom. They made excuses for why they didn't support a bill that basically said you have the right to birth control.
Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. All across America, families are in mourning. Their parents and grandparents, particularly the men in their lives, have been stolen from them by the right-wing hate and rage machine, particularly Fox so-called news. Jen Senko produced a movie. It's called The Brainwashing of My Dad, about losing her own father to Fox so-called news. It was also made into a book. But now comes along Tim Walz, and Tim Walz is like everybody's dad, everybody's grandpa. He's the grandpa that you wish could sit down with your grandpa who's been indoctrinated by Fox News and kind of wake him up out of the trance. He's the dad that people who grew up in dysfunctional families wish they had. He's just a normal guy. You know, he joined the Army National Guard right out of high school. He rose up to Commander Sergeant Major. He became a top advocate for America's vets. He went to college, got his master's degree, taught high school social studies. He's a good man. He smiles. His students love him. There's a whole op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
In the heart of our hometown, where the streets are bustling around, we gather beneath the morning sun. Together we can get things done.
Welcome back. We're broadcasting live from Northbrook, Illinois at the Max and Benny's Diner, and taking calls or questions, excuse me, from our live studio audience. Kelly, who's up next?
Hi, my name is Alice from Buffalo Grove, and I'm really, really concerned about Project 2025. They did a great job at the convention and with the comedian from Saturday Night Live and how he went through the book and the pages. But do you think, what more can the Democratic Party do? I think they should be, all their advertisement, everything that they're doing out should be out there. There's so many fears like the union and education and gay rights and just everything, abortion rights, our whole country, our civil rights are going to be gone.
Yeah.
What do you think they can do?
And first off, I called Carrie Kelly, and my apologies, Carrie. Project 2025. You know, the good news is they've just told us what they're all about, and they just laid it out, and they were so confident that they were going to beat Sleepy Joe and all that kind of stuff. You know, and this was their opportunity to turn America back to 1955, and well, actually, they don't even want to take it back to 1955. In 1955, Dwight Eisenhower was embracing unions, and we had a 91% income tax rate. But you know, I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant here, and I was so pleased to see repeatedly Project 2025 being mentioned throughout the Democratic convention. It was never mentioned during the Republican convention because they realize how toxic it is, and they don't want to go. The word abortion was never mentioned during the Republican convention either, right? They understand what America doesn't want, and that's why they're shoveling horse manure at us as fast as they can. But I really think that the number one thing is to talk about it and share with people. There's 3 really good newsletters over at Substack. They're all free. Substack.com, it's a big publishing platform about Project 2025. And if you go to there and you plug in Project 2025, and they push them right into your email box, once or twice a week, and some just great information. So, get that stuff, share it with your friends, wake people up. That's what we got to do. That's our work. Carrie?
Hi, Tom. I'm Steve from Des Plaines.
Hey, Steve.
And really enjoying your show here.
Thank you.
I wanted to just get your comment on in the beginning you started talking about what you think the Republican Party is. And I think Kamala kind of laid out pretty well about what they want to do for women's reproduction rights. And I wonder if you agree with the Republicans want to turn this into the Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's in Project 2025. I mean, they want to have the menstrual police, basically. And in fact, 18 state attorneys general, I believe it was 18 of them, have sued against the Department of Health and Human Services, because right now women's reproductive, all medical records are private, and they want women's medical records to be publicly available, or not publicly available, but be available to the attorney generals of any state for any woman in any other state. Because what they're looking for are women in Alabama who come to Illinois to get an abortion. And in some cases, they're even looking, they want to start, there are some substantial databases, and this is something that's not getting a lot of attention, and it really should. There are some substantial databases from smartwatches and now smart rings that can be used to identify fertility periods and can be used to identify women who pregnancy before women even know that they're pregnant. It's not, even 5, 6, 7 days before a missed period. And there are giant companies that are accumulating this data and brokering it. And these attorneys general from these Republican states are now, they can buy this data right now in the open market. It's largely, they will not sell it to the public, but it's available. And frankly, I think we need legislation to, we already have it. The HIPAA law prevents this, but like I said, you've got, almost 20 Republican state attorneys general who are suing right now, and they're trying to get it before the Supreme Court to knock down that law so they can have access to particularly young women, single young women's basically menstrual records, the menstrual police. This is how far they're going. And make no mistake about it. And birth control is next as well. So, next.
Hi, Olivia from Downers Grove.
Hi, Olivia.
As a Medicare recipient, I'm very concerned about Medicare because of the C programs. What's the future for that? And is there some new legislation that can restrain those, the C programs, the Advantage programs?
Not yet. The Advantage programs are hurting Medicare badly, and we really, Mark Pocan and Ro Khanna have this Safe Medicare Act, which just says you can't use the word Medicare for Medicare Advantage anymore. It's a great thing, but we've got a lot of work to do there. Thanks so much for that, and thanks everybody for being here. It's great having you with us and being here with you. And I'll be back on the air on Monday. Until then, get out there, get active, tag. You're it. I'll see you then.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
why America needs to know about Trump getting spanked in silk pajamas. And it's pretty straightforward. The most powerful elected Republican in America has declared war on the rule of law. This happened yesterday. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced that Congress, on behalf of wannabe dictator for a day Donald Trump, is going to use every power available to him and his colleagues to essentially nullify our court system. Here's the exact quote. He said, quote, "President Trump has done nothing wrong here, and he continues to be the target of endless lawfare. It has to stop. And you're going to see the United States Congress address this in every possible way that we can, because we need accountability. All these cases need to be dropped because they're a threat to our system." Right. All these cases and potential future cases include Trump sharing secrets with Russia that burned U.S. and U.S. ally spies, inciting rebellion against the United States on January 6th, running his businesses from the White House while multiple foreign governments poured cash into his properties in violation of the Emoluments Act, stealing national defense secrets from the White House and transporting them to Florida and New Jersey, and then lying to the FBI about them, raping and then threatening and defaming E. Jean Carroll, criminally obstructing investigations into his campaign's ties to Russia, conspiring with Republicans in multiple states to defraud the American people with forged electoral college certificates, threatening Georgia's Secretary of State with criminal prosecution if he wouldn't, quote, "find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have," violating campaign finance laws on multiple occasions, committing tax and insurance fraud, and extorting a foreign leader, Mr. Zelensky, to manufacture dirt on his political opponent. And those are just the most commonly known crimes of Trump. I mean, you know, scratch the surface. You know, from his teenage years, writing C on the applications of black people who wanted to rent apartments from his father in violation of the law, to decades of business crimes, including a fraudulent university and a fake charity, to stealing money from thousands of employees and contractors. Trump's been a one-man crime wave his entire life. And now, you know, given the choice between throwing in with a career criminal or defending America's criminal justice system, the rule of law, separation of powers, the Republicans have chosen to throw in with a crook. I'm telling you, Barry Goldwater and Everett Dirksen are rolling over in their graves. You know, the guys who told Richard Nixon, "You got to resign, buddy." Our rule of law system started on June 15th, 1215, in a plain in northern England called Runnymede, where the barons of England forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. It basically guaranteed habeas corpus rights to the British nobility, and for about 400 years it was only the British nobility, but then in the 1600s it got extended to knights, and then in the 17 and 1800s these rights became, you know, were applied to pretty much everybody. Here in the United States, we got these rights in 1789 when the Constitution was ratified by the 13 states. But even now, America has two political parties, and one of them is following the example of Russia and Hungary, whose leaders earlier, just in this century, the 21st century, rejected democracy in favor of oligarchy and autocracy. They've turned away from this 809-year-long tradition. You know, John Adams used to talk about America being a government of laws and not men. Right. That's not what's going on right now. Here's